Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Viviana Paresi and Gioele Mondello. In August 2020 in Italy, where 40-year-old Viviana Paresi lived with her 4-year-old son Gioele and her husband Daniele Mondello in the small town of Venetia. Viviana worked as a DJ in a nightclub. Originally from Turin, she moved to Venetia to be with her husband Daniele, who was also a DJ. Together, they created electronic music and were well-known and successful figures in the local nightlife scene. Both Daniel and Viviana actively maintained social media pages to promote their activities. Viviana frequently shared photos and videos, especially of her son Gioele, portraying their family as happy. However, their online presence was quite public, with Viviana posting clear images of her child's face, which raised concerns about privacy and safety. Some people cautioned Viviana about the potential dangers. On the morning of August 3, 2020, at 9:00 a.m., Daniele and Viviana woke up and had breakfast as usual. They planned to go to the recording studio to work, but Viviana decided to leave later. First, she needed to take her son to buy him new shoes. This means Viviana will have to take her child with her throughout the day to ensure she is supervised. On this day, Viviana forgot her cell phone at home. She prepared some food and got ready to go to work, including a trip to the mall to buy shoes for her son. Viviana and her son left home at around 10:00 a.m. They arrived at the toll booth in Mila and continued their journey along the highway towards Palermo. While passing through the Turde Tunnel on the Messina-Palermo highway, Viviana had an unfortunate accident. Her tire went flat and hit a road service car on the move, in which there were workers. Fortunately, it was not a serious accident. After slowly exiting the tunnel, she stopped in the nearest parking lot, just a few dozen meters from the exit. Several witnesses saw Viviana get out of her Opel. Some approached her to offer help, but she ignored them. They saw that no one was injured, so they eventually left. However, someone called the police to report the situation. The police arrived to inspect the car and found no signs of blood. Inside the car, they found Viviana's money and handbag, but neither Viviana nor Gioele were present. A long time passed. Daniele was at the studio, waiting for her to return from the trip. He tried calling her cell phone several times and left several voice messages, but he did not receive an answer. By evening, when Viviana and her son had not returned, Daniele was worried about her absence, so he went to the police to report her missing. That was when he knew that something had happened to Viviana. The police were investigating the disappearance of Viviana and Gioele because Viviana had been involved in a traffic accident that needed to be resolved. As time passed without any news, her husband became increasingly worried. For 5 days, nothing was heard from Viviana or Gioele. She was reported missing, and the Carabinieri police and volunteers were actively searching for her. Several teams searched the area around the parking lot where Viviana had left her car. On August 8, specially trained dogs joined the search. At around 3:00 p.m., they discovered Viviana Paresi's body, located a kilometer from her abandoned car. She was found hidden in a bush at the foot of the observatory. At the time, drones were used to search, but the bodies were so well hidden that they could not be seen from the air. Only sniffer dogs can detect the smell of a decomposing body. Daniele received the news that devastated him. While Gioele was still missing, Viviana's body was sent for forensic analysis. Unfortunately, the condition of the body was very poor. The body showed multiple injuries. Observers noted obvious bite marks and pieces of flesh attached. A forensic expert pointed out that such injuries could have been caused by wild animals after her death. Viviana suffered multiple fractures, which are common in falls from great heights. She was found at the bottom of a 16-foot-high cliff. In order to gather more information and clarify the situation, the police began investigating Viviana's personal life. During the investigation, they began to suspect that her husband, Daniele, was involved in the incident. However, Viviana's friends and family had only positive things to say about him. Daniele admitted that Viviana had been depressed. She was even hospitalized for a short time, but was discharged shortly after. As a result, she experienced mood swings. Her relatives confirmed her difficulties, but noted that by August, she had shown significant improvement. However, it was difficult for them to fully understand her situation because they lived far away and had never met her in person until now. There is no information about the investigation into whether Viviana may have killed Gioele and then chosen to end her life by jumping off a cliff. Unfortunately, the search efforts were unsuccessful. Even with the help of sniffer dogs and drones, Gioele's body was never found. While examining Viviana's computer, police noticed that she had become increasingly interested in something called the Pyramid of Light, a work of art built using precise mathematical calculations. At the center of the pyramid, there is a spiral path that symbolizes the journey towards light and knowledge. Just days before her disappearance, Viviana had been researching how to get to the Pyramid of Light because she wanted to take her son there to be enlightened. It is important to note that based on her route that morning, she was likely headed to the Pyramid of Light, which was located 100 kilometers from their home. Viviana's recent social media posts hint at feelings of loneliness and reflection on her inner life. She may not have wanted Daniele to know about her journey to the pyramids. After investigation, the police discovered that she had been acting unusually over the past few months. She was often seen with the Bible, seemingly seeking comfort from her fears. She even held the Bible in public places. Things took a strange turn when Viviana publicly read passages from the Bible in front of the church. Viviana's family shared information with the police that Viviana had been acting erratically in the months leading up to her death. Viviana was concerned for her son's safety and sought refuge at the pyramids, but she never showed any intention of harming herself or her son. Police suspect that she may have been thrown to the foot of the tower column where her body was found. As if she had jumped herself, she would have fallen much further than where her body was found. During the investigation, the police found no fingerprints of Viviana on the pylon. If she had actually tried to climb up there to jump, she would have left some traces. In addition, the height of only 5 meters did not seem to be enough to cause her so many fractures. However, the area was home to many wild animals. If these animals were strong enough to move her body, they could easily drag her a considerable distance. During this time, witness accounts collected by the police regarding the Viviana's actions in the parking lot were conflicting. Some witnesses maintained that the Viviana was seen holding the child, while others insisted she got out of the car alone without any child or companion. Additionally, some observers noted that she was carrying a large bag. An elderly couple reported that after the car stopped, 2 people approached Viviana and tried to help her. Police have issued a public alert calling on these 2 people to come forward as they are believed to be important witnesses who could help clarify the circumstances surrounding Viviana's death. Only they can confirm whether the child was actually with Viviana. Police pieced together a timeline of events from the morning of the incident by analyzing surveillance camera footage to track Viviana's movements. They were able to track most of her route along the highway. One particular incident caught their attention. As Viviana approached the highway toll booth, she said she had no money and was asked to pay with a credit card. However, it was clear that she had cash and a credit card with her as she was planning to go shopping. Police found Viviana's behavior very suspicious. After driving past the gas station, they located her at a gas station in a nearby suburb. She had taken a long detour to fill up there, which was unusual as there were several other gas stations along the route. Viviana had no problem paying for the gas as she used cash, unlike at the checkpoint, What was most important to the investigation was that Gioele was still in the car with his mother at this gas station. The boy was alive and well. The gas station attendant reported that everything seemed normal at the time. Just 10 minutes later, an accident occurred in the tunnel. Police believe Gioele may have died in the accident. When Viviana stopped and realized she could no longer help the boy, she may have made the tragic decision to end her own life. This theory was soon dismissed as there was no blood or injuries found in Viviana's car. Another theory was that Daniele may have been a domestic abuser, which led Viviana and her son to choose to escape from him. It is believed that she saw the trip as an opportunity to take the child away from a dangerous husband. However, this idea was quickly dismissed as Daniele was widely regarded as a kind and loving person, and few believed that he could be abusive. Of particular concern is the voicemail on Viviana's phone that Daniele left while searching for her. Unable to reach her, he recorded a reassuring message in which he told her not to worry, that nothing had happened and that they would not do anything to her. This statement suggests that he was comforting her after a troubling event. Daniel said he was worried about Viviana and Gioele, which prompted him to try to reassure her. However, Viviana had left her phone at home, so she could not contact him to explain the situation. This made him even more worried. He did not provide the police with a clear explanation of his concerns or any useful information. However, the police believed he knew more than he was letting on. Meanwhile, the investigation discovered that Viviana had been suffering from severe panic attacks and mental health issues in recent months, for which she had been receiving medication and treatment. Daniele mentioned that Viviana may not have been taking the medication prescribed by her psychiatrist. According to Daniele, she only relied on medications that she was familiar with. As a result, she was in an unstable state with Gioele. This situation could have led to an attack. Viviana clearly endangered Gioele. On August 16, two witnesses who had helped Viviana came to the police station. They turned out to be a married couple. They were unaware of Viviana's death because they did not recognize her in the pictures shown on television. However, when they received word that the police were looking for them, the couple agreed to clarify what had happened during their encounter in the parking lot. Witnesses confirmed that Viviana was holding a child in her arms during the incident. Neither Viviana nor the child appeared to be seriously injured. Witnesses noted that there were no signs of scratches, bruises, or bleeding. The child in Viviana's arms was conscious. The couple then suddenly saw Viviana appear to be in a panic and run away with the child. She held Gioele protectively and ran through the bushes. The two witnesses followed her, believing that something was wrong and that Viviana and the child needed help. However, Viviana quickly fled from them into the dense vegetation, and Viviana did not respond to their calls, causing them to stop searching for her. After the investigation, there were still no further clues leading to Gioele's whereabouts. The police discovered a medical certificate which included a psychiatrist's assessment of Viviana's condition. She had a nervous breakdown and became paranoid. Daniele became desperate when the police failed to find his son. He assembled a team of volunteers, mostly friends and family members. Amazingly, later that evening, while searching the area near where Viviana's body was found, they discovered the body of a baby boy. The condition of the body was tragic. The body was badly decomposed, and some of the bones were missing, likely carried off by wild animals. Because the body was so badly decomposed that identification was impossible, after testing through dental records, they determined the body was Gioele. Unfortunately, the discovery of the body does not bring us any closer to solving the case. Daniele believes this shows negligence on the part of the police. He is baffled as to why they did not find the body sooner, especially since it was already decomposed and was near Viviana's body at the time. After the investigation, the police discovered that Daniele knew about her serious emotional struggles but showed no concern for her or her well-being. Investigations revealed that shortly before her disappearance, he had begun communicating with a divorce lawyer. Viviana found out about his intentions to divorce him. Did this revelation cause her to take such drastic measures? Unfortunately, GOL's autopsy was inconclusive. The cause of his death was never known. In order to find out why the family tried to conceal information about Viviana's illness, the police wiretapped all family members. During the wiretapping, the police discovered that no one in Viviana's family agreed that her cause of death was end his own life. Other than that, nothing suspicious was discussed. Her relatives simply underestimated the severity of her illness. Daniele's family later spoke out. They claimed that the police had conducted a poor search and had not found Gioela's body quickly enough, which may have missed important clues. They were confident that Viviana would not have taken her own life or harmed her son, although they admitted that she had struggled with mental health issues of late. At the same time, Viviana's family claimed that someone was chasing her and that she was eventually caught in a remote area where both she and her child were killed. However, that no witnesses reported seeing anyone chasing her. They also noted that Viviana had the opportunity to ask passers-by for help, but chose to run away. Despite the family's objections, the investigation decided to close the case. Viviana's family publicly disagreed with the decision, but their request was ignored. Viviana Paresi and Gioela case confirmed as a murder-suicide by scientific police. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sandra Gallas. Sandra was born on May 15, 1978 in Japan. Her background was a mix of half Japanese, a quarter Hawaiian, and a quarter Portuguese. Sandra had an older brother, Lawrence, who always looked out for her. After Larry retired early from the military, her parents, Larry and Tashi, decided to move to Hawaii. Turns out, Hawaii is Larry's hometown. They settled on the island of Kauai, fulfilling their long-held dream of living in Hawaii. They instantly fell in love with the stunning island and found the locals to be extremely kind and welcoming. By the age of 4, Sandra was practicing gymnastics, and by 5, she was learning the traditional Hawaiian hula dance. She studied very well and became a very beautiful girl. Sociable, cheerful, and active, she made many friends. After graduating from high school, Sandra attended New York University to study journalism. Although she dreamed of becoming a journalist, her life took a different path. As someone from an island, she found New York City overwhelming, with its towering, makes her feel suffocated. She didn't enjoy living there and visited her parents in Hawaii, missing them greatly. After graduating, Sandra returned to Hawaii, where she met Darren Gallas, who was working as a builder at the time. Darren was captivated by Sandra's beauty, and they began dating in 1999. With her parents' blessing, they got married, and Sandra took his last name. They bought their own house on the island of Kauai. They appeared to be a happy, loving family. Sandra and Darren had 2 sons. A year after their wedding, they welcomed their first child, Austin. 2 years later, their youngest son, Bordon, was born. Sandra took care of the children and managed the household. She and Darren love their sons very much and always try to do the best for them. However, their relationship gradually deteriorated. In 2005, Sandra discovers Darren has been having affairs with 2 married women. She found their phone numbers among his belongings. After she called them, they confessed to having affairs with Darren. She decided to end the marriage and filed for divorce. She could not bear his infidelity any longer. In June 2005, Darren moved out of the family home, while Sandra and their children remained there. Sandra changes her hairstyle to enter a new phase of life. Sandra started working as a waitress at a restaurant on the island to support herself and her children. Her goal was to become financially independent and no longer rely on Darren. Sandra's kind, polite, and friendly nature made her a favorite among the restaurant's guests and staff. It was there that she met Ryan Shinjo, a chef. He was calm, polite, and courteous, the exact opposite of Darren. As they spent more time together, a romance blossomed. Sandra felt comfortable and at ease with him, something she hadn't had in a long time. Ryan made her happy, and their relationship grew deeper and deeper. On weekends, they would often take trips to Honolulu. And Ryan would shower her with gifts. Sandra's parents were overjoyed to see their daughter happy again after a difficult divorce. Sandra and Ryan had plans to move in together, but unfortunately, those plans were not meant to be. Soon, tragedy struck. On January 25, 2006, 27-year-old Sandra was brutally murdered. That morning, before going to work, Ryan visited her. But when he knocked on the door, there was no answer. This was unusual, because they had agreed that he would stop by to visit her before going to work. He began checking the area around the house to understand what was going on and found that the garage door was closed and the lights were still on, meaning someone must be inside. He thought it was Sandra and that she simply hadn't heard the knocking at the door. Ryan looked out the garage window, and he saw a strange sight inside. Inside the car, Sandra was half lying down and unresponsive. Concerned that she might be suffocating from exhaust fumes, he screamed and called her name. But she did not answer. Panicked, he rushed to a neighbor's house, about half a kilometer away, for help. Together, they managed to open the garage door. Upon entering, he touched Sandra. He found her body was already cold. Immediately, he called 911 to report that Sandra was not showing any signs of life. Sandra, 27, was pronounced dead by paramedics. Police began examining her body, which was found inside the car. She was partially lying down, with her lower body in the driver's seat and her upper body thrown back onto the front passenger seat. It was clear that Sandra had been dead for some time and had been attacked. Her body showed signs of beating and had lacerations on his neck, indicating that she had been murdered. Forensic experts searched the crime scene for evidence, but found none. There were no CCTV cameras or witnesses in the area. Police suspected that Sandra had been trying to escape from someone, as it appeared she had been in a hurry to leave. She had been getting ready quickly, got into the car, but didn't have time to drive away. Instead, she was attacked, knocked down, and strangled. Investigators found no signs of robbery in the house. Valuables were still in their places, and there was no sign of disarray. Sandra was not raped, so what could have been the motive for the murder? Meanwhile, Sandra's parents were visiting their son in Texas and never imagined that something like this would happen to their daughter. In the morning, Sandra's boss called her because she hadn't shown up to work. This worried them, as Sandra was always known to be hardworking and responsible. When her parents tried calling her, she didn't answer. By evening, they received the devastating news about their daughter's murder and rushed back home. The brutal killing shocked everyone on the island. The locals were scared and worried that a serial killer might be on the loose on the island, posing a threat to them. People asked the police to explain, but the authorities reassured the people. They believed it was a crime with a personal motive, meaning it was intentional and targeted. Hawaii generally has a very low crime rate compared to the national average, except for certain disadvantaged areas on the island of Oahu. Detectives were committed to solving the case quickly to reassure the island's residents. Investigators believe the brutal nature of the death suggests a personal motive, so they considered ex-husband and current lovers as suspects. Ryan, the current lover, discovered Sandra's body. Darren, her ex-husband, had a strained relationship with her, and their divorce was nearing finalization. Darren is very sad about their divorce, and he became enraged upon learning about her affair with Ryan. Additionally, Darren and she was embroiled in a heated custody battle, which caused constant conflict. As a result, investigators questioned both suspects, Darren and Ryan, at the scene. First, they interrogated Darren. He stated that the day before the incident, he had picked up the children according to the court-ordered schedule. He took them to kindergarten in the morning, painted his mother's room while they were away, and then picked them up, spending a pleasant time with them. Darren claimed that when Sandra was supposed to pick up the children in the afternoon after work, but instead, the police came to him with bad news about her death. Darren claimed he was not involved in Sandra's death. Even though they are divorced, they still maintain a peaceful relationship and keep in touch for the sake of their children. Initially, he spoke confidently, but his actions showed the opposite. In the middle of the interrogation, he became nervous, confused his statements, and raised the police's suspicions. He could not provide verifiable alibis. At the time of the tragic incident, their children were too young to give statements, being only 3 and 5 years old. According to Darren, he was home alone at the time. But he failed the polygraph test. Turns out, he never called Sandra to check why did she come home late, which was unusual, leading investigators to suspect him of Sandra's murder. A search warrant for his home has been issued. The police discovered that a room remained unpainted, contradicting his claims. This suggested he might have had the opportunity to go to Sandra and kill her. After thoroughly inspecting the house, investigators found nothing relevant to the case. Despite their suspicions, the detective had to let Darren go home. They interviewed people close to he and Sandra, including her parents. All suspected him of having something to do with her death. He was known to be extremely jealous and controlling. He did not want to leave her and opposed the divorce until the last minute. Sandra had no enemies. Her family and relatives believe that Darren is the only person who could be her killer. Sandra's new lover, Ryan, provided an alibi. Although he failed a polygraph test, he was removed from the list of suspects. An autopsy revealed that Sandra died from strangulation, with characteristic marks on her neck and hemorrhages in her eyes. Her body also showed multiple injuries, indicating a painful death. Detectives were convinced that Darren was directly involved in her death, but they lacked the evidence to prove it. 2 years later, Sandra's undershirt was re-examined. During this detailed investigation, DNA was found and sent for analysis. The results revealed that Darren's DNA was present on her undershirt. This led authorities to consider charging him with murder, as it was considered vital evidence. However, the prosecutor decided against pursuing charges due to insufficient evidence. Before the murder, they were in regular contact and saw each other, especially when he came to pick up the children. Therefore, it is possible that his DNA accidentally got on her clothes without being related to the murder. The children, Austin and Bordon, lived with their father, Darren. He had been granted full custody. The loss of their mother, Sandra, at such a young age was a significant shock for them. Austin and Bordon's maternal grandparents have requested custody of the 2 children, citing Darren's aggressive behavior and his endangerment of the children. They believed he was responsible for Sandra's death and accused him of alienating the children from their grandparents. Despite these accusations, the court awarded full custody to Darren. He later married his new girlfriend, Kyron, and moved on with his life. As time passed, the investigation made no progress. Sandra's parents maintained regular contact with investigators, determined to seek justice for their daughter. From the moment he learned of Sandra's murder, her father vowed to continue to find the culprit so that he could be punished by the law. Thanks to the persistence of Sandra's parents and their close cooperation with the police, the case was eventually solved. The family offered a $20,000 reward to anyone providing information leading to the arrest and conviction of their daughter's killer, but still no one spoke up. It was not until 2012 that a team of investigators was assigned to look into the case. They reviewed all the materials with a fresh perspective and discovered some other details. In the documents, they found letters from Sandra to the attorney handling her divorce. These letters showed that her relationship with Darren was very strained. The letters revealed that she was afraid of his aggressive behavior. He had threatened her, was unhappy about her new relationship, and had harassed her. The most important evidence is the sign that Darren is a fussy person. Sandra mentioned that he was so meticulous and organized in everything he did, to the point that he wrote down in his diary every time she was upset about something, no matter how minor. This information intrigued the police, causing them to return to Darren's house to find and examine the diary. When they found out, they were shocked because he had kept detailed notes of every complaint about Sandra. He recorded every day of their life. For instance, he noted when she was 5 minutes late for a meet or bought the wrong kind of bread. However, there were no entries on the day before the murder, which puzzled the police because they knew he and Sandra had met, making it hard to believe that such a picky person would have no complaints to record. Sandra did not pick up the children on the day she died. Why didn't Darren note this in his diary or try to contact her? Perhaps he already knew she was dead and wouldn't be coming. Darren said he did not remember clearly what happened that day, which is why there is no diary entry for that day, even though he recalls other details clearly. His behavior seemed odd and unbelievable. Researchers speculated that he killed Sandra because he didn't want a divorce. In October 2012, Darren was charged with second-degree murder, with bail set at $1 million. He managed to post bail, allowing him to stay home during the trial preparation. Darren maintained his innocence. His lawyer pointed out that there was no evidence against him except DNA on the clothes, which might have ended up there for legitimate reasons, as he often picked up the children. All other evidence was circumstantial. Despite disagreements with Sandra, but they had reached an agreement on the division of property and shared custody. Therefore, the defense argued Darren had no motive to kill her. Additionally, Darren's attorney asked investigators to turn their attention to Ryan Shinju, who was romantically involved with Sandra at the time of her death. Ryan had a criminal history related to burying illegal substances. However, he denied all accusations against him, citing an alibi for the time of Sandra's death. He also cooperated fully with the investigation. He attributed his past criminal record to youthful mistakes and emphasized that he has not committed any offenses since then and has shown no inclination toward violence. Sandra's relatives and friends, called as witnesses for the prosecution, supported Ryan's statements. They described him as a kind person who Sandra felt very comfortable around. None of them believed Ryan could commit murder, especially since he had no motive. However, they had a different opinion about Darren. Darren was a cruel and domineering. He was someone Sandra feared. She avoided seeing him to avoid angering him. By court order, Sandra was forced to give Darren the opportunity to communicate with the children, even though she did not want to. Ryan added that he and Sandra planned to move in together for her protection against Darren. He suspects Darren is the person behind the crime, although there is no direct evidence. During the trial, Darren was portrayed poorly and was likely to be convicted. On his lawyer's advice, Darren accepted a plea bargain from the prosecution to reduce his sentence. This decision disappointed Sandra's family, but the prosecutor argued that a plea deal was the better option because without enough evidence, Darren could be acquitted. The prosecutor estimated a 50% chance of conviction, so Sandra's family agreed to the plea deal. In May 2018, 12 years after Sandra's murder, Darren pleaded guilty to first-degree assault on his wife, causing serious bodily harm. He did not provide any details about the crime. He was sentenced to imprisonment with the possibility of parole after serving 85% of his sentence. In March 2022, his minimum term was reduced by 6 months. He may be eligible for parole in 8 years, with the earliest release date being May 2, 2026, and the latest May 1, 2028. He is currently serving his sentence in prison. Sandra's parents are still upset by the sentence, considering it unfair that Darren received only 8 to 10 years for a brutal murder. They believe he acted in a calculated, planning everything meticulously. He allegedly cleaned the crime scene thoroughly, wore gloves, and hid all evidence. He also provided a false, claiming he was painting walls, which was later proven untrue. Now that Sandra's parents are over 80, they live a peaceful and steady life. Her father had several heart attacks due to severe stress after losing his daughter. His biggest wish was to see Darren put in jail. Their son, Lawrence, often visits them from Texas. Sandra's parents hope Darren will one day feel remorse for his actions. Sandra lived a respectable life. Her children are now adults, living independently, no contact with maternal family, so little is known about them. Sandra's parents think Darren is the one who turned her children against her and her maternal family. During the trial, Sandra's children, then adults, sided with Darren and his parents. They do not believe that their father killed their mother. They attended all the hearings and, after Darren was convicted, cut ties with their mother's family. They believe that their mother's family put their father in prison. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Christy Giles. Christy and her friends attended a Halloween party at Soho House, West Hollywood, and had a fantastic time. After the party, however, Christy and her friend Hilda didn't go home. Christy Giles, born November 5, 1997, grew up in Mount Olive, Alabama. She is extremely beautiful and intelligent, attracting attention wherever she goes. Christy was the runner-up in the Miss Alabama beauty pageant. At the age of 14, she signed her first modeling contract, gaining financial independence from her parents. At the age of 18, she moved to Los Angeles, California after being recruited by a famous modeling agency. By the age of 24, she had become a successful model, appearing in fashion magazines and advertising for major brands, while also exploring acting. Christy is very close to her parents and sisters. In 2019, Christy met Jan and married him on August 31, 2020. They are a loving couple and her husband owns a candy store. On Friday, November 12, Christy, along with Christine Giles, Hilda Marcelo Sobrales Arzola, and another friend whose name is unknown, attended a Halloween party. Jan was away in San Francisco for the weekend and couldn't join them. After the party, Christy and Hilda did not return home. At around 5 p.m. on Saturday, Christy's body was found dead on the sidewalk outside a Culver City hospital where she had been left. 2 hours later, Hilda, 26, was found outside another hospital, still alive and in critical condition. Her family traveled from Mexico to be by her side, hoping she would recover. Sadly, there was no miracle. Hilda was declared brain dead 2 weeks later and taken off life support. Her organs were donated, allowing part of her to continue living. Hilda, who is from Mexico, graduated with honors and landed her dream job as an interior designer in Los Angeles. A third friend who attended the party with Christy left early and was not injured. Preliminary autopsy results indicate the girls died of an overdose of illegal substances. Toxicology reports found a mixture of drugs in their systems, but no signs of a physical struggle. It is unclear how the drugs entered their systems, as both girls said they lived healthy lifestyles. Initially, Los Angeles police believed the girls had voluntarily taken the drugs, leading to their overdoses. However, After interviewing a friend of Christy and Hilda, their views changed. The friend mentioned that the girls had met several men at the party, and that the men had invited them elsewhere. She described the group as 4 men in their 40s and 1 woman. 2 men act indecently, running around shirtless as if they are on drugs, while a 3rd man, who appears sober, focuses on Hilda. A 4th man and a woman appear to be a couple. This group stands out at the party because of their age. Initially, the woman compliments Christy's friend, leading to an introduction to the men. Feeling uncomfortable, Christy's friend left the party with her brother an hour after the group arrived. Surveillance footage revealed 3 masked men dropping the women's bodies at separate hospitals before fleeing. Christy's husband, Jan, was deeply saddened by her death, as she had never used drugs, especially since her cousin had struggled with addiction and a close friend had died of an overdose. Jan suspected her drink had been spiked. At 12 o'clock, Jan tracked her phone to an apartment building at 8641 West Olympic Boulevard in Los Angeles, where the girls reportedly attended a party. Her phone was still there at 1:30 a.m. The police discovered that the building had only 7 apartments and identified which one hosted the party and who invited the girls. It was David Pierce's apartment. He claimed the girls took drugs voluntarily, but he has no information about what happened to them. Recently, it was reported that the police interviewed David's neighbors. They mentioned hearing strange sounds, like cries of pain, coming from his apartment on Saturday throughout the day. They also noticed that many people frequently visited his place, often making noise. Other bones from the first party also saw David with friends at the party, and they behaved strangely. After Jan shared Christy's story on social media, he received numerous messages from other girls who had similar experiences involving these men. They reported being taken from parties, drugged, and raped, though all the girls survived. Out of fear, they did not report it to the police. Christy's father was a military officer who served in Iraq and trained his daughters in self-defense. Christy's sisters were well prepared and could defend themselves even with a ballpoint pen. This makes it all the more puzzling for Christy's parents to understand what happened to her, as there were no signs of a struggle on her body. Hilda's family is also seeking justice for both Hilda and Christy. Hilda's parents are confident that their daughter did not willingly consume any illegal substances. They had taught her about the dangers of drugs. Hilda was an active person who loved sports and hiking. Her family believes that the girls were forcefully given drugs with the intent of assaulting them, but the perpetrators overdosed them by mistake. What angered the parents was that instead of taking Hilda and Christy to the hospital to save them, the men chose to abandon them. On December 16, 2021, the Los Angeles Police Department announced the arrest of 3 men connected to the deaths of Christy Giles and her friend Hilda. David Pierce, 37, was arrested for manslaughter and is being held on $1 million bail. Michael Ansbach, 47, and Brant Osborne, 42, were arrested for being accessories after the fact to manslaughter, with both held on $100,000 bail. These men were the last to see the women alive. A photo has surfaced showing Hilda with David and Michael at the party. Location data from Christy's phone showed that she and Hilda had gone to David's apartment in East Los Angeles after attending a party. They were reportedly out with 3 men in the early morning hours of November 13th, according to David's neighbors. A Toyota Prius seen in surveillance footage matched the vehicle used when 3 masked men dropped Christy and Hilda off near the hospital. The men were known to frequent clubs and bars in Los Angeles, meeting women at parties, inviting them to their homes, allegedly using illegal drugs, raping them, and then releasing them. But for Christy and Hilda, it appears they miscalculated, leading to their overdoses. The police are currently gathering information from all the affected girls. Several girls have already come forward, claiming they ended up in David's apartment under similar circumstances. They believe that the men spiked their drinks without their consent, causing them to black out and lose memory of the events. Some girls also reported that the men harassed them, pretending to be film producers, and invited them to a casting. It has been revealed that Michael is a videographer, Brandt is an actor with minor TV roles, and David is an actor and producer known. According to several co-stars on set, Brandt bragged about driving Christy's Hyundai the night they died. Actor Stephen Bauer, known for his role in the cult classic Scarface, has come forward to say he witnessed David assaulting a girl at a house party in Beverly Hills. The men were questioned by the police and admitted to taking the girls home from the party. However, they claimed the girls took drugs voluntarily and overdosed. Unsure of what to do, they decided not to call 911 to avoid trouble. Instead, they left Christy's body near a hospital after removing the car's license plate to avoid detection. They later left Hilda's body at the hospital, hoping she would regain consciousness. To date, the police have not received the CCTV footage as the investigation is still ongoing. A GoFundMe has raised more than $130,000 for the girls' funerals or investigation, and the amount continues to grow every day. On November 20, 2021, a memorial service was held for Christy in California. Friends laid flowers on the beach, carved hearts in the sand, and erected bushes and arches in her memory. Brandt, 42, and Michael, 47, were both arrested on suspicion of being accessory to manslaughter in connection with the deaths of Christy and Hilda, but have since been released from custody while the investigation continues. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jodi Jones. Luke Mitchell, born in 1988, was the younger of two children. When he was 11, his parents separated, and he stayed with his mother without moving away. The family lived in the small, middle-class town of Eat Houses, Scotland. From a young age, Luke was well-behaved, he enjoyed horseback riding, excelled in school, and had a passion for music. He entered secondary school at St. David. However, during his teenage years, particularly in high school, he began to exhibit unusual behavior. At that time, he met a girl named Jodi Jones, who was almost 2 years younger than him. Jodi was born in 1989 in another small town in eastern Scotland. The country is generally known for having many small towns located close to one another. Jodi was the youngest of 3 children in a middle-class family. Both of her parents worked for the Royal Mail. She was calm, well-mannered, and did well in school. The school director even commented that she had a bright future due to her achievements in class and extracurricular activities. Family was very important to her, and she was a creative person who enjoyed poetry and painting. Jodi was close to her eldest sister, Janine. Interestingly, all members of the Jones family had names starting with the letter J, including their parents, James and Judy. The family was decent and appeared genuinely happy until 1998, when the father began experiencing mental health issues and ended his life tragically. This was a devastating blow to the family, and the mother, Judy, had to leave her job to take care of the 3 children. The tragedy affected not only Judy but also the children, who were very worried. Eventually, Janine moved to Mayfield briefly to live with her grandmother, because everything in the house reminded her of the incident. However, after some time, she managed to cope with her problems and returned to her family. Gradually, life returned to normal. Everyone adapted to living without a father, the mother went back to work, and the community supported the family. As a teenager, Jones showed a rebellious streak. She wanted independence and began to experiment with clothes and appearance, listened to heavy rock bands popular at that time, and got herself a piercing. Her mother resisted these changes, particularly when Jodi showed interest in alcohol and prohibited substances. She began experimenting with these substances at an early age. Around the time Jodi met Luke, they were both 14 years old. The two met at school, became friends, started skipping classes together, and began dating in February 2003. They were deeply in love and even planned to marry. Jodi wrote in her diary that her feelings for Luke were serious and profound, not just a superficial crush. At the start of her relationship, Jodi didn't tell her friends or family about her boyfriend, Luke. For some reason, she kept him a secret. This hidden relationship went on for quite some time until she finally decided to share it. She confided in her older sister, Janine, revealing that she had a close relationship with Luke and felt very strong emotions for him. Janine understood the seriousness of the situation and informed their mother, Judy. Judy was of course shocked by the news, but was afraid of pushing her daughter away from her, so she decided to act very carefully. Judy wanted to meet Luke to understand him better, given Jodi's deep feelings, and asked Jodi to introduce them. In May 2003, Luke returned home with his girlfriend Jodi to meet her family and get to know them better. However, things didn't go as planned. Judy learned from Luke that Jodi was smoking and drinking with her friends, and Judy also discovered she had tried weed. This makes Judy worried about her daughter's increasingly close interactions and relationship with Luke. Even before the meeting, Judy had looked into Luke's background and learned about some of his unusual habits. Many local people had unfavorable words about him, seeing him as independent and daring, and occasionally rude, though he wasn't involved in any criminal activities. After a brief discussion, Judy was convinced that Luke was a bad influence on her daughter and that their relationship was risky. She forbade them from seeing each other and put her daughter under house arrest until June 30th, hoping this would help her focus on finishing the school year without distractions. However, Judy's plan failed. Luke and Jodi continued to meet in secret. Judy found a path Jodi used almost daily to sneak out and spend time with Luke. They would kiss near her home and share their frustrations about Judy's strictness. Luke and Jodi was eagerly waiting for the end of house arrest to spend their summer vacation together. June 30th finally arrived, and Jodi, very much looking forward to it, was thrilled that house arrest would end. She looked forward to seeing Luke and spending time with him freely. As soon as it was 5 p.m., Jodi left home. She planned to meet Luke for an evening together. Judy allowed her to go but set a curfew of 8 p.m. However, she did not return home at the appointed time, and Judy couldn't reach her by phone. Worried that something was wrong, Judy began searching for her daughter. When Judy went to Luke's house, Jodi was not there. Concerned, she asked Luke about her whereabouts, but he said he hadn't seen her that day. She had not shown up for their meet. This seemed unbelievable, as Jodi had eagerly awaited this moment and had hurried to meet him. Judy became angry, suspecting that he was lying. Judy, distraught, did not believe him and demanded he answers, but he insisted he knew nothing. He agreed to accompany Judy to search for she. Luke's parents owned a specially trained dog, so they decided to follow the route she was supposed to have taken. Since there was only one road linking the neighboring towns where they lived, so they searched this route, but did not find she, which was strange. She continued to ignore their calls and messages. Despite this, Judy, Luke, and the dog persisted, keep searching over and over again, but still in vain. Finally, while walking the route again in the dark around 10:30 p.m., the dog picked up a scent in a wooded area and led them there. Luke followed the dog into the forest, using a flashlight. In the distance, he noticed something white on the ground near some walls. As he approached, he made a horrifying discovery. It was Jodi's half-naked, disfigured body, tied up. She had been killed in a particularly brutal manner, which deeply shocked both Judy and Luke. Judy became hysterical, trying to aid her daughter, but it was too late. She showed no signs of life, and her body had already cooled. The mother couldn't accept that her daughter was gone. Luke comforted Judy's and called emergency services. Soon after, the police also arrived at the scene, and they were extremely shocked by this discovery. it was a literal bloodbath. Such violence had never occurred in this previously quiet area. Who could commit such a cruel act against a girl? The injuries of Jodi resembled those of Elizabeth Short, who was murdered in 1947 in Los Angeles. The girl's body was not only cut in half, but her internal organs were removed. Additionally, on her face was a Glasgow smile, which is a knife cup that extends from one ear to the other. This case is one of the most famous yet to be solved. Due to the similarity of injuries, so the case of the murdered Jodi Jones was dubbed Black Scotland by some media outlets. This gruesome incident caused widespread panic among residents of both communities. Locals fear that a vicious maniac has appeared in the area and expect new attacks. To calm the public, police needed to urgently solve the case and incarcerate the dangerous criminal before he struck again. The specially trained dog amazed everyone by leading the search party straight to the body. The girl was found in a hidden spot, known only to her, under a tree, where her and a friend's initials were carved. Some witnesses believed this was not a coincidence but a clue. Jodi's body had numerous cuts and stab wounds, primarily on her chest, neck, and head. Her arms had many cuts, indicating she actively tried to defend herself. Her neck was so damaged she was nearly decapitated. She was also severely beaten, with her hair pulled out. The girl was raped, and she died from strangulation. Forensic experts investigated the crime scene and discovered a used condom, along with DNA samples from 3 men on Jodi's body. These samples were sent to the lab for analysis. Despite public concerns about a serial killer, the police believed the murder was personal, and Jodi was not a random victim. Naturally, suspicion fell on her boyfriend, Luke, whom she was supposed to meet. Typically, those close to the victim are involved in such cases. It was believed that Luke might have been the last person to see her. His calm demeanor and indifference to Jodi not meeting him as planned raised eyebrows. Why didn't he call or look for her? Perhaps because he already knew she was dead. Luke was considered suspicious by the police, so they decided to investigate him. Although he had no visible injuries, the numerous defensive wounds on Jodi suggested she must have left marks on him. His face and body would likely have been scratched. Jodi's mother, Judy, noted that her daughter's rebellious behavior began after meeting Luke, and she blamed him for everything, from her daughter's change in style to her daughter's murder. She claimed that Luke's negative influence had drastically changed her daughter. During that time, Jodi behaved so recklessly that she had to be put under house arrest. At school, in addition to her behavioral changes, she experimented with illegal substances. Jodi's mother, Judy, believed Luke was directly linked to these issues. Judy also argued that the dog didn't lead Luke to the body. She said he knew the location and led the dog straight to the crime scene. She opposed Luke so strongly that she asked him not to attend the funeral, partly to avoid media attention, as his presence at the service would have drawn interest from local newspapers. Rumors spread rapidly, and by the next day, the whole school knew what had happened. There were claims that Luke was involved in the brutal murder. Luke was known for being eccentric and called himself the town madman, but his oddities were never violent. Police suspect Luke is the one who killed Jodi, so they obtained a search warrant for his home to gather evidence and bring charges against him. While searching his room, detectives came across a peculiar picture in numerous bottles filled with urine. They didn't understand why he filled them and kept them at home. He did not provide any explanation for this. And this is just one of many strange things police discovered in his home during their investigation. His home was filled with satanic symbols, and he was notably obsessed with the singer Marilyn Manson. From the point of view of the investigation, all of this is not in the suspect's favor. However, could such eccentricities really indicate he was capable of a violent crime? In spite of his peculiar behavior, Luke denied any involvement in the crime. From the moment the police expressed their suspicions, he insisted that he loved Jodi and could never harm her. During his discussion with investigators, he mentioned a hair clip, and this raised suspicion as the hairpin was not seen when her body was discovered. Furthermore, his description of her clothing suggested he saw her later in the day, contradicting his claim that he hadn't seen her after school. According to him, she had different clothes and a hair clip at school, which didn't align with his story. The DNA on the used condom did not match Luke's. However, Luke's DNA was found on Jodi's bra among other unidentified samples. The police did not have enough evidence to charge him, but he was still the main suspect in the murder investigation and was called in for questioning. Investigators also spoke with his parents. Local residents' opinion of him turned very negative, and teachers at the school tried to isolate him from other students out of safety concerns but were unsuccessful. After 2 months, Luke returned to his class, not wanting to study separately. Consequently, the school administration had to suspend Luke from classes for the duration of the investigation. For the next 10 months, Luke remained the sole suspect. The police focused exclusively on him and did not consider other potential suspects. Ultimately, based on circumstantial evidence, Luke, 15 years old, was arrested for the murder of 14-year-old Jodi Jones. He also faced charges for possessing and carrying a knife in a school setting. One of the challenges in the investigation, besides the lack of evidence, was determining the motive for the murder. The police faced an issue because Luke was below the age of criminal responsibility. Later, it was revealed that the police committed several violations. Specifically, they were criticized for interrogating the 15-year-old without any adults present, such as his legal guardians or parents, and without a lawyer. The boy was pressured and forced to confess. During this time, law enforcement was more focused on building the case and finding evidence of Luke's guilt. They visited his home again and conducted another search of his room. His house was searched 3 times in total. Surprisingly, no blood was found in the house. However, many suspicious items were discovered and later used to accuse him of a brutal crime. Among these items, investigators confiscated a large number of Marilyn Manson CDs and copies of Manson's film Doppelhörs. A particular 10-minute scene in the film, where the main character committed a brutal crime against a black dahlia, was of great interest. Many drew parallels between the film and the real tragedy, leading to the belief that Luke was simply imitating his idols. Investigators suspected that Luke might have timed the massacre to coincide with a cult or ritual inspired by his favorite rock bands. He was eventually arrested, bringing relief to the city's residents, who viewed him as a murderer, Satanist, and psychopath, posing a danger to society. His eccentricities were publicly scrutinized, although they had not harmed anyone, until Jodi's murder. Rumors and sensational stories quickly spread. The case was heard in the Supreme Court of Edinburgh. However, Luke denied any involvement in Jodi's death. The prosecution argued that he was guilty of killing his girlfriend Jodi, pointing out that he discovered her body, even though he used a specially trained dog. Jodi's mother claimed that he brought the dog himself. Additionally, a witness reported seeing a man resembling Luke in a khaki jacket with Jodi near the crime scene, hugging, around the time before she passed away. However, this testimony has caused much controversy, as other witnesses reported seeing 2 men, and the witness ultimately could not positively identify Luke. At the trial, Luke's ex-girlfriend testified that he once threatened her with a knife, which frightened her greatly. However, he claimed he had an alibi, but it was unreliable. Luke's brother stated that on the day of the incident, he was alone in the house watching TV. However, their mother, Corinne, said she was at home with Luke at that time, and the brother was just in his room and mistaken. Despite this, the brother insisted he was alone, watching adult films, which he only did when no one else was home. Eventually, Corinne admitted she had lied, and Luke was indeed not at home. They faced consequences for this, and she was even held accountable. So, where was Luke? He never revealed his whereabouts, and it was impossible to track his phone. The prosecution presented a reconstruction of the events. According to the prosecutor, Luke and Jodi met near a tree with their initials a little after 5 p.m. About 50 minutes later, he was seen alone. The prosecution claimed that he was fascinated by the story of the Black Dahlia and had watched a film of the same name, which included a disturbing scene of a massacre. Witnesses mentioned that he occasionally smoked a pipe. Then, he allegedly contemplated acting out something he saw in the film and harmed Jodi. It was also revealed that he possessed a small case containing a knife, engraved with Jodi's initials and her birth and death years. The case also had a note stating that the best day of he was the one that never came, a quote from Kurt Cobain, who was his idol. While none of this directly proves a crime, but the prosecution interpreted these details as suspicious coincidences, all pointing to he. The prosecutor's office believed Jodi had been killed with a particular knife, but the knife vanished and couldn't be found for comparison. Luke couldn't explain its disappearance. Neighbors of Luke testified during the trial that on the evening of Jodi's death, Luke burned something in his backyard. The prosecution suspected that this was how he disposed of the clothes he wore during the crime. Witnesses mentioned that the fire had a strange odor. However, when police searched his house, they found nothing significant. They did confiscate a large steel barrel used for burning garbage. In total, 122 items were confiscated in connection to the case. Notably, a new khaki jacket which a witness had seen disappeared from Luke's house. The prosecutor suggested that he burned it to hide blood stains. The jacket, purchased by his mother shortly before the murder, was last seen on him that day and then mysteriously vanished, raising further suspicions. A witness, a friend of Luke, testified at the trial. He claimed to have had a strange conversation with Luke shortly before the murder. Luke allegedly said that the best way to kill someone was by cutting their throat and mentioned that Luke could imagine killing someone. That day, Luke was texting Jodi, with their last message exchange occurring between 16:35 and 16:54. After 1700 hours, Luke called the information service to ask for the exact time. This was puzzling because if he was at home, as claimed, he could have just checked his watch. The lawyers argued that there was no evidence against Luke. Besides Luke's DNA from 2 other men was found at the crime scene. But only one was identified. It belonged to a friend of Janine. The prosecution suggested that these traces were present because Jodi wore Janine's shirt. Luke's DNA was on her bras, and her DNA was on his pants, but since they were in an intimate relationship, the presence of their DNA on each other's clothes was considered irrelevant to the murder case. The defense contended that Luke was eccentric, a fact he didn't deny. Yes, he was a rude teenager interested in strange things, but none of these were direct indicators of guilt. The lawyers attempted to demonstrate that he couldn't have committed the crime against his girlfriend. The numerous stab wounds to the throat nearly detached her head from her body. Forensic experts counted about 20 wounds in the neck area alone, while Jodi fought back desperately. Luke would have certainly sustained defensive marks, yet no witnesses or police officers noticed any on him during the search. There were no scratches on his face or body. The lawyers argued that he didn't have a motive for murder. He loved his girlfriend and valued their relationship. Why would he murder her, especially on a day when all restrictions imposed by her mother were lifted? They shared a serious romantic relationship filled with tender feelings and rarely argued. It just didn't make sense. The case was highly controversial, ultimately left for the jury to decide. On January 20, 2005, the jury began their deliberation. After about 5 hours, they concluded that Luke was guilty of first-degree murder. On February 11, the verdict stated that the 16-year-old would face at least 20 years in prison before eligibility for parole. However, many still doubted his involvement, believing that two people were involved in the murder. This thing allowed he to file several appeals, which were denied. Luke's mother had to sell their house and buy a smaller one to afford the legal fees. She fully supports her son and believes in his innocence. In 2019, a fund was established to raise money to support a man named Luke and to file new appeals on his behalf. However, the site hosting the fund eventually blocked it because it violated the site's terms. Despite these setbacks, Luke remained determined. Since 2003, when he was first accused of killing his girlfriend, he has consistently denied involvement. He made it clear that even if he were offered release in exchange for a confession, he would not accept it because he would never harm Jodi, his girlfriend. Luke had numerous supporters who, after hearing the guilty verdict in court, distributed flyers throughout the city proclaiming his innocence. So strong was their support that they even considered storming the prison. Their aim was to highlight what they believed to be Luke's wrongful conviction. However, their approach was questionable. Such actions could potentially harm Luke's case, and they also negatively impacted the Jones family, who were unjustly blamed for the situation and even received threats. In May 2007, the controversial trial resulted in the creation of a documentary about the case, which renewed interest in Luke's case. Moreover, this film revealed numerous irregularities committed by the police in charge of the investigation. Initially, the police considered Luke innocent, although they investigated him as a suspect. However, as more was learned about him, they found unconventional and unknown aspects. Most of the townspeople had a clearly negative opinion. Amid rumors and the extraordinary behavior of the town's eccentric, the investigation ceased to consider other people as suspects. All the evidence was circumstantial. Even Jodi's wounds, initially believed to resemble movie cuts, did not match so much. In fact, it was even questioned whether Luke was really a fan of Satanism and Marilyn Manson. He just followed some unpopular trends of his teenage years. To prove his innocence, Luke agreed to take a polygraph test on April 25, 2012. He passed the test successfully. 2 months later, the mother of he also underwent the polygraph test, and experts confirmed that both passed flawlessly. The documentary explored a theory that the murder might have been committed by a student who had written an essay about the murder of a girl in the woods a few weeks before Jodi's death. A friend of this student saw him shortly after the crime and noticed scratches on his face. Luke's family believes the investigation overlooked a crucial piece of evidence: condoms containing unknown male DNA. No DNA from Luke was found. They argue that the motive for the murder was rape, with the rapist attacking she and dragging her into the woods. They feel the investigation should focus more on this angle. Additionally, they claimed that when Jodi's mother came to Luke's house, he had not yet showered, yet there was no blood on him. They argue that if he were the killer, he would have showered and changed clothes immediately to wash off any blood. Years ago, the crime scene was vandalized with red graffiti referencing Jodi's murder. The message included a different name, suggesting that another person might be the murderer. This graffiti is believed to have been painted by Luke's supporters to assert his innocence. Luke's family hired 2 private detectives who identified several suspects, with Mark Kane among them. Mark was a local drug addict who died suddenly in May 2018 at age 38. Witnesses saw him at the crime scene on the day of the murder, with a scratched face and known to carry a knife. He claimed the scratches were from falling into bushes, but no one believed him given the context of Jodi's murder. However, despite his suspicious background, all suspects, including Mark, were eventually interrogated and cleared from the list. The family of Jodi is certain that the person who killed their daughter is Luke, the one currently in prison. They have no doubt about his guilt. Meanwhile, Luke's family continues their pursuit of justice. Almost 2 decades have passed since his imprisonment, and his legal team has accused investigators of multiple violations, notably the absence of forensic analysis on several DNA samples from Jodi, particularly those related to allegations of rape. This significant oversight has cast doubt on the conviction. Luke's lawyers are determined to overturn the sentence. Now 35 years old, Luke might be eligible for parole in 2025. However, he reportedly failed a random test this year. By regulation, after this point, the opportunity for parole will be postponed for another 3 years. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Ivonne Baldelli. Ivonne Baldelli, born Fold, was born on June 30, 1969, in a small town in sunny Southern California. She was the third and youngest child of Marjorie and James Fold and grew up with her brother Michael and sister Michelle, with whom she developed a particularly close relationship from an early age. When Ivonne was 13, her mother passed away after a long illness. A year later, her father remarried Leland F.A., and the grown children developed a wonderful relationship with their stepmother, who was a kind and caring woman who loved her husband's children as her own. Ivonne received a solid education and explored many career paths, but her main passion was always fashion design, and she dreamed of turning her hobby into a profitable business. However, luck never seemed to be on her side when it came to her personal life. She had been married twice, but both marriages ended in divorce. Additionally, a surgery she underwent as a young woman, followed by complications, left Ivonne unable to have children. After her divorce from her second husband, Kevin Baldelli, in 2007, Ivonne lived alone in her small apartment with her dog, whom she affectionately called Baby. She kept in regular contact with her father and sister, calling them almost every day and trying to see her family at least once a month. In 2009, as Ivonne was preparing to celebrate her 40th birthday, she met a Marine named Brian Brimmager. At the time, he was legally married and had a young son with his wife. Despite this, Brian was open about his extramarital affair and shared with Ivonne that he was unhappy in his marriage, claiming that he had not filed for divorce only because he did not want to hurt his child. Ivonne fell in love with this handsome, tanned, healthy man at first sight and believed every word he said. Having experienced the pain of a loveless marriage herself and knowing how difficult it is to leave such a relationship, she did not push her partner, believing that the presence of a child was the main obstacle. However, Brian was not as straightforward and sincere as he seemed. From a young age, his attractive appearance made him very popular with the opposite sex. He was used to juggling several relationships at once and skillfully deceived the women who fell in love with him, promising each of them marriage, a family, and eternal love. It was soon discovered that the married Brian had not only met Ivonne but had also had another mistress. This other woman was Christine Verhoeven, a gorgeous blonde with many connections. She was a White House analyst. When Ivonne learned about another rival, she decided to tackle the situation directly and fight for the man she loved. Summoning her courage, she contacted Brian's wife to reveal that he was cheating on her with 2 women. This revelation caused a heated debate, forcing Brian to make a difficult decision. In the end, he chose Ivonne, though it's possible she influenced his choice. A few months later, Brian officially divorced his wife and moved in with Ivonne. At that time, he was still in the Marines but had been thinking about leaving his military career. The couple appeared genuinely happy, but Yvonne's family remained skeptical of Brian, questioning the sincerity of his feelings. In the summer of 2011, Brian expressed his desire to make significant changes in his life. He wanted to leave the military, move away from the busy city, and settle on a tropical island. Yvonne felt the same way. She supported him completely and was ready to go wherever he chose. She believed he was the most important person in her life and loved him deeply. By September of that year, they had made their decision, the couple would move to Panama and live on the small island of Carino, which they considered a true paradise. Ivonne told her family about her plans just before leaving, so they didn't have a chance to convince her to change her mind. She sold her apartment, quit her job, and began packing for the trip. Ivonne packed only a few bikinis, shorts, tank tops, and her sewing machine, aiming to start a small boutique where she could create and sell custom outfits for tourists on the new island. In early September, Brian, Ivonne, and her beloved little dog flew to Panama. They spent a few days in the capital before taking a ferry to Carino Island, where they rented a house right by the ocean. The climate was hot and humid, with consistent temperatures year-round, which attracted many tourists, especially those interested in diving and surfing. The island was only 1 square kilometer in size, allowing visitors to walk around it in about an hour. Most of the infrastructure was located along the coast, while the interior consisted of dense jungle and swampy areas filled with venomous snakes, spiders, and other wildlife, making it dangerous to explore. Brian, a talented guitar player since he was young, brought his guitar hoping to start a musical career by performing in local entertainment venues on the island. Within a week of moving, he had contacted with several local bar owners, and one of them offered him a job. He performed in the evenings, entertaining the crowd, but his audience often bought him drinks, which led him to drink heavily almost every day. Ivonne's business was growing very slowly, facing poor sales and making little profit. Nevertheless, she remained determined. She took a job at one of the bars and adopted a second dog she found on the island. Ivonne communicated with her sister, Michelle, almost every day, sharing updates, but her messages became shorter and more gloomy, causing concern for her family. The couple initially enjoyed their first few months on the island, feeling like they were in paradise. Ivonne dreamed that Brian would propose and they would have a romantic wedding by the ocean. However, as time went on, Brian didn't seem eager to get married, and their relationship began to decline. By early December, Michelle noticed that Ivonne had stopped messaging her, which made her worry. Then, on December 14, 2011, Brian unexpectedly called Michelle to ask when he could come by to pick up his SUV, which he had left in her family garage before going to Panama. This call surprised Michelle because it meant that Brian was back in the US and wanted to pick up his car. She wondered where Ivonne was and why she hadn't returned or even contacted her. Brian said he had detailed everything in an email sent a few days ago. He also said that his ex-girlfriend had supposedly messaged Ivonne about the situation. Michelle looked at her messages but found nothing, so she checked her email. She discovered 2 unread messages, one from her younger sister and another from him. In his messages, Brian stated that Ivonne had left him, running away to Costa Rica with a new lover. Another message, purportedly from Ivonne, claimed that she had left Brian after discovering his affair and learning that another woman had given birth to his child. The message ended with her stating that she had met another man and gone to Costa Rica with him. The other woman turned out to be Brian's old friend, Christine, with whom he had been involved for a long time and who was pregnant with his child when he and Ivonne flew to Panama. At first glance, everything seemed reasonable, especially since Ivonne was unable to have children. The news that her partner had fathered a child with someone else would have been extremely distressing for her. However, Ivonne was not known for acting impulsively, and she would certainly have called her younger sister to discuss such a major change in her life. Furthermore, the tone of the message purportedly from Ivonne was somewhat strange and unlike her previous communications, which raised further suspicions. When Michelle attempted to determine her younger sister's current whereabouts, she was unable to obtain any concrete information. Calls went unanswered, and incoming messages were brief and discreet, stating things like, "I'm fine, I need time," and "I'm not ready to talk about this." Michelle suggested that Brian file a missing persons report. Brian appeared concerned but insisted that it was unnecessary, asserting that Ivonne was fine, capable of taking care of herself, and would decide when to return home. Although Brian was reluctant to even discuss the matter and hurriedly left after getting the car, a message from Ivonne's phone soon arrived, stating that she planned to return home in January for their father's birthday. This message relieved Michelle, and she decided to wait a few more weeks, hoping that Ivonne would return as stated in the message. By mid-January, not only had Ivonne not returned home, but she had also not called once during that time, and her messages had stopped altogether. Furthermore, Michelle was shocked to learn that Brian had married Christine just before New Year's, which seemed very strange since he had broken up with his ex-girlfriend just weeks before the celebration. Worried, Michelle eventually went to the police department and reported her younger sister missing, suspecting that Ivonne had not gone to Costa Rica. An official investigation sent to Panama, the results showed that Ivonne had not left the country. Michelle then asked her cousin, a programmer, to help track down the IP address from which Ivonne had sent the messages, determining their true origin. It turned out that the emails purportedly sent by Ivonne from Costa Rica in December were actually sent from Dana Point, California, where Brian was staying. The same IP address was used for an email sent by Brian himself. As the situation became increasingly alarming, Michelle rushed to inform the police of her discovery. Michelle contacted the FBI and the State Department, sharing her suspicions that Brian had harmed her younger sister in Panama and then continued to send text messages and emails from her phone, pretending to be her for about a month. However, there was not enough solid evidence at the time to arrest him, so law enforcement could only interview him and continue to gather evidence of his guilt. It was revealed that Brian had proposed to Christine while still in Panama with Ivonne. He promised Christine that he would return soon, that they would marry, and that they would raise their daughter together. Furthermore, Christine did not know that Brian had come to the island with Ivonne, as he had told her he was there on business. The family's investigation began 2 months after Ivonne's disappearance when her sister and niece flew to Panama themselves. There, they sought the help of Don Winter, a former U.S. intelligence officer turned investigator specializing in finding missing U.S. citizens. They shared the story of Ivonne's disappearance and Brian's version of events. After listening to them, Don immediately expressed concern that the possibility of Ivonne being alive was very low. With extensive experience in such investigations and leveraging her connections, Don decided to put pressure on the Panamanian government and publicize the case, turning the disappearance of an American woman into international news. A press conference was held with the participation of Ivonne's family members. Later, Ivonne's father, stepmother, brother, and several other close relatives and friends traveled to Panama to join the search and assist in the investigation. Together, they went to the tropical island of Carino, searched thoroughly, but found no trace of Ivonne. Their search efforts were hampered by dense bushes and swamps filled with wild animals. In addition, the family asked the islanders how well they knew Brian and Ivonne and what they could tell them. It turned out that the couple had been drinking heavily recently and often argued loudly, disregarding those around them. They were seen at the bar almost every day, drinking and arguing violently. Furthermore, people began to notice bruises and scratches on Ivonne's face and body. She hardly ever took off her sunglasses, apparently to hide the bruises under her eyes. The couple's landlord confirmed that neighbors frequently complained about noise, screaming, and swearing coming from their residence. At the same time, FBI agents brought a special team of divers to the island to search for any potential evidence or remains of her. Unfortunately, these searches also yielded no results. Brian was initially the prime suspect in the case, but there was no concrete evidence to charge him. He denied any involvement, repeatedly telling the same story about his ex-partner running off with another man. It was not until September 21, 2012, that Brian was questioned and his home searched. At the time, his wife, Christine, was at work while Brian, unemployed, stayed home with the children and immersed in his beloved game of golf. Initially, he appeared confident, recalling that Ivonne had left him after discovering his child with another woman. However, he became visibly concerned, and the police mentioned that the last messages sent under Yvonne's name came from his area and expressed interest in examining the laptop found on his desk. The confiscated laptop turned out to be Yvonne's, with messages sent from it after she had supposedly fled. A photo of Yvonne with a bruise under her eye was found on the computer, as well as a screenshot of a conversation from November in which Brian and Christine discussed their ongoing affair and the shared custody of their daughter, which is probably how Yvonne learned about them. Furthermore, the laptop search history from November 26, 2011, contained queries such as how to clean blood and how to remove blood from a mattress. These pieces of evidence were important but circumstantial, as no body or mattress with bloodstains was found. The fact that Brian had sent messages impersonating Yvonne did not conclusively prove his guilt. Don soon discovered that before leaving Panama, Brian had sold a machete he owned. In an online chat with a potential buyer, he joked that he had only used the weapon once, to finish off a stripper. The prank was so creepy that authorities tracked down the machete's new owner and confiscated the blade for testing, which initially yielded no reliable results. The long-awaited arrest came when police overlooked another crucial detail: Yvonne's bank card. Brian had used the card after she disappeared to add credibility to his story. Before returning to the United States, he decided to take a trip to Costa Rica and used her card multiple times, creating the illusion that she had actually fled to that country. He paid for his ticket in cash and withdrew money from various locations in San Jose, emptying the card before discarding it. Brian had no idea, however, that he had been caught on surveillance cameras at ATMs. In July 2013, a year and a half after Yvonne disappeared, her relatives, along with evidence collected by the police, FBI, and Don Winter, succeeded in getting Brian arrested. He was initially charged with making false statements and obstructing the investigation due to a lack of stronger evidence at that time. At that point, Brian had recently become a father for the second time, as Christine had given birth to a son just a week before his arrest. Authorities attempted to have an honest conversation with Brian, hoping he would confess to the crime and reveal where the body was, but he repeatedly denied any involvement. His lawyer argued that there was no body and no direct evidence linking Brian to Yvonne's disappearance. 2 months after Brian's arrest, investigators made a shocking discovery in the swamp that significantly advanced the case. On Canero Island, a worker exploring a shortcut accidentally stumbled upon a partially submerged army backpack in the murky underbrush. Out of curiosity, he opened the bag and was horrified to find a human skull inside. He promptly reported the discovery to the police, who arrived to collect the backpack for further examination. Inside, they found dismembered human remains along with the bodies of 2 small dogs. The remains had been cut into pieces, placed in the bag, and hidden in a spot where they were unlikely to be discovered. DNA tests confirmed that the human remains were those of Yvonne, though some body parts were missing. Pathologists revealed that she had suffered severe trauma prior to her death, including a broken nose, cheekbone, and several missing teeth. The presence of the dogs suggested a calculated effort to support the narrative, as it seemed unlikely that Yvonne would abandon her beloved pets, implying that they were also killed and buried alongside her. The chop marks on the victim's bones matched the blade of a machete, confirming that the body had been dismembered with this one. Each machete blade has a unique pattern, similar to a fingerprint. As a result of this evidence, Brian was officially charged with murder, dismemberment, and concealing a crime. In early 2014, Michelle was diagnosed with advanced aggressive cancer. She had been so focused on investigating her younger sister's case that she neglected her own health and put off doctor visits. After 6 months of intensive treatment that didn't work, she chose to spend her remaining time fighting for justice for her sister. In September 2014, doctors informed Michelle that she had only a few weeks to live. Despite her illness, she vowed to continue advocating for her sister until her last moments. She decided to testify in front of Brian, sharing everything she knew and providing all correspondence with Ivonne to the court. She carefully recounted Brian's actions following her sister's disappearance, but then fainted from exhaustion. Michelle died 3 days later. The prosecution contended that on the night of November 26, after another argument with Ivonne over Brian's messages to Christine, Brian, fueled by anger and alcohol, attacked Ivonne and fatally stabbed her. He then dismembered her body in the bathtub with a machete, using the same weapon to kill Yvonne's dogs, and placed their remains in his military backpack. The limbs that couldn't fit in the bag were discarded in the ocean, thrown off a rocky cliff early in the morning, along with a blood-stained mattress. Brian then carried the backpack deep into the island and submerged it in a swamp. For the following weeks, he stayed in the same coastal house, carefully removing any traces of the crime. He told the locals a convincing story about his girlfriend leaving him for another man, which led them to sympathize with him. He even found a new girlfriend, Nicole Powell, who comforted him for a few weeks until he left for the U.S. During the trial, Nicole testified against Brian, accusing him of dishonesty and being cruel. With strong evidence against him, Brian admitted his guilt but argued it was in self-defense, claiming that Ivonne had attacked him first with a knife, which he then used to defend himself. He stated that everything that happened afterward was due to shock, insisting he didn't remember dismembering her body or handling the dogs. However, his internet searches and efforts to destroy evidence showed that he was fully aware of his actions and tried to create a false narrative to explain Yvonne's disappearance. In the spring of 2016, Brian was convicted of manslaughter and received a 26-year prison sentence, with the chance for parole in 2035. His prior service in the Marines was taken into account during sentencing, which helped him avoid a life sentence. Additionally, Brian's wife, Christine Verhoeven, expressed her belief in his innocence and her unwavering support for him. The tragic case of Ivonne Baldelli highlights not only the devastating impact of domestic violence and deceit, but also the tireless pursuit of justice by her family. Despite the initial fog of lies and misdirection, the truth ultimately emerged, revealing a chilling narrative of betrayal and loss. Yvonne's story serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of vigilance and support for those in perilous situations, urging us to seek justice for victims and ensure that their voices are never silenced. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Bordon family. The Bordon family's story began in Missouri when Michael and Catherine met as classmates in school. Michael was drawn to Catherine, who was blonde, radiant, and responsive. He used different methods to capture her attention, like helping with homework and inviting her for walks. This led them to become best friends, spending much time together, learning, and sharing secrets. Over time, their friendship blossomed into love. Michael invited Catherine on a date, during which he first expressed his love for her. After some time, they got married in a beautiful and memorable ceremony, where they vowed to love each other through all of life's challenges. 10 years into their marriage, they moved to Lititz, Pennsylvania, a town founded by members of the Moravian Church in 1756 and home to descendants of Moravian communities. Life in the town was calm and serene. Many families were part of the Christian Amish community and lived in a way that reflected their beliefs. They embraced simplicity, choosing to forego many modern technologies. The Bordon family was very religious, so choosing Lititz was intentional. This suburb seemed ideal for raising children, as life there was consistently peaceful. Each day was similar to the previous one, offering the tranquil environment the family of Bordon desired for family life and spiritual connection with God. Michael was involved in the local church, where he taught Sunday school, while Catherine mainly took care of the home and helped her husband with his community work. Michael primarily worked for spiritual fulfillment, but to support his everyday needs, he worked as a manager at a printing company. Over the years, they had 5 children, 3 boys and 2 girls. Most families in Liditz were large, with many having more than 5 children. To protect their children from the challenges and dangers of the wider world, families often attended church, Our local teenagers participated in youth groups and they were homeschooled. Interaction between families was mainly through joint religious organizations and celebrations. The family ideal established by Michael Bordon continued for many years, raising children with faith and discipline. At the beginning of the 2000s, the oldest sons left for university in another city, leaving 3 children at home. These children continued their homeschooling, much to their parents' satisfaction. Neighbors and the couple's few friends praised the children's upbringing and their wide range of interests. Kara, Caitlin, and Daniel were known for being exemplary, kind, and responsive, although this wasn't always the case. However, when Kara, the eldest daughter, hit her teenage years, she totally shook up the family traditions. Against her father's wishes, she started playing for the local soccer team, sneaking out to nightclubs, and doing everything she used to be forbidden from doing. Her behavior affected her father. Long talks and guidance just couldn't get through to Kara. Arguments became frequent and often led to her running away. She openly showed interest in boys and sought out relationships. In 2005, David Ludwig, who was 18, and Kara Bordon, who was 14, met in a support group for students with homeschooling issues. They were both quickly formed a close friendship, unbeknownst to their parents. They decided to create social media profiles to communicate secretly. Their exchanges were frequent and emotional, and they used encoded messages to keep their conversations hidden for as long as possible. After some time, exchanging letters was no longer sufficient, so they started meeting in secret. Initially, they took walks in quiet, secluded areas around the city. Gradually, their friendship turned into a romantic relationship. They began sneaking out at night to go to discos and stayed together until morning. David, being older, had already experienced first love and break. Kara, on the other hand, was so young that her emotions were overwhelming. Kara was very young, so her emotions were intense. She didn't simply walk, she appeared to glide, with a joyful smile constantly on her lovely face. Meeting David made Kara become obedient to her parents again. Her father was thrilled, thinking the teenage troubles were a thing of the past. But Michael was wrong. It was only the fear of being found out by her parents that calmed the girl's rebellious spirit while she hid her love for David. This saddened Kara a lot, as she knew how her parents would react to relationships at such a young age. Since childhood, they had instilled very different ideas about the possible love between a man and a woman, trying to protect her from that reality for as long as possible. Fearing her parents' negative reaction, they guarded their secret very carefully, but sooner or later, all secrets come to light. One day, Kara couldn't hold back any longer and shared her secret with her sister. She showed her a photo of David and explained how their relationship started, expressing how deeply in love they were and their determination to be together against all odds. They were even ready to elope. Worried for Kara's safety, her sister told their mother about the elopement plans, revealing the secret of them. Early one morning, Kara quietly climbed through the window into the house and tiptoed to her room, feeling thrilled. She had just returned from a date with David. However, when she entered her room, she froze. Her mother was sitting on her bed, and the situation became pressured without a word being spoken. After breakfast, Kara's parents told her she was not allowed to have any relationship with the young man. Her parents were upset because they had tried to protect their children from violence, drugs, and other negative influences, and they couldn't believe this had happened. Kara's father was so angry and disappointed that he wouldn't let her leave her room that night. However, Kara spent the night at David's house instead. At 5:30 a.m., David dropped her off near her home. They had agreed that Kara would text him as soon as she safely returned to her room. But the message never came. David called her home several times and sent a few messages on social media. An hour later, Kara told him she had been caught and asked him to come over so her parents could talk to him. David arrived on time for the meeting. The conversation started with Kara's father expressing strong anger and forbidding David from seeing his daughter. Kara's parents held very conservative values and were firmly against her having relationships at such a young age. The father's heart was unmoved by David's words of love. He warned David that if he saw him with Kara again, he would report him to the police for being involved with a minor. Despite the long and emotional discussion, it ended without resolution. Kara was locked in her room once more, and David left empty. Indeed. He got into his old car and drove away, crying for the first time over a girl, or perhaps because he felt he wasn't taken seriously. The separation was very difficult. The lovers struggled with being apart and couldn't handle it, so they decided to deceive everyone. They pretended to break up to meet Kara's father's demands but continued their secret love affair. In public or at church, they acted like ex-lovers and didn't even acknowledge each other. Kara's parents felt reassured, believing they had safeguarded their daughter from a rash decision. David missed Kara deeply. In the evenings, he read Shakespeare, dreaming of serenading her openly like Romeo. However, like in the Capulet and Montague story, the lovers couldn't reconcile their families to win their approval. David Ludwig took determined steps regarding his relationship with Kara. He called her home to arrange a meeting with her father, intending to discuss their plans to marry. On November 13, 2015, David arrived at the Bordon residence to speak with Michael, Kara's father. He expressed his love for Kara, their ongoing relationship, and their intention to get married. Michael dismissed the idea, saying it would never happen. Expecting such a reaction, David, driven by anger, pulled out a handgun and shot Michael in the back as he was heading to the front door. David then went to find Kara's mother, Catherine, and shot her while she was sitting in a chair. David searched the house for Kara, calling her name, but he couldn't find her. Later, as he was driving away, he saw Kara running towards him down the road. She got into the car and told David she wanted to leave, get married, and start a new life far away. They fled the city in David's red car. But why would a 14-year-old girl run away with someone who had just been so brutal? Wasn't she shocked and scared? Both were seen as good kids. How did they become criminals? Kara Bordon went missing for 24 hours after her parents, Michael and Catherine Bordon, were found dead. After examining surveillance footage, the police tracked the teenagers. The footage showed that Kara went with David willingly, so the charges of abducting her were dropped against David. Alerts were sent across the East as police in Pennsylvania and Indiana investigated reports of the couple heading west in a red Volkswagen Jetta. On Monday morning, authorities received a tip about a vehicle matching that description parked near a truck stop outside Fort Wayne. However, when the police arrived, the car was gone. State police were alerted, and patrol officers spotted the car on I-70 in Belleville around noon. David Ludwig entered the interstate and led them on a 5-mile chase, reaching speeds of 90 to 95 miles per hour on a 2-lane highway. State Trooper Alex, who participated in the pursuit, described David as extremely reckless and dangerous, causing multiple accidents like scenes from an action movie. The saga of the runaway lovers became a major national news story. Television broadcasts showed the capture of the teenage fugitives after the boy had killed his girlfriend's parents and fled with her. It was revealed that David and Kara planned to escape far away, get married, and start a new life. The district attorney announced that the earlier Kara abduction charge against David would be dismissed, but the charges for the deaths of Michael and Catherine would continue. After the incident, David and Kara fled together and were on the run from the authorities for about 28 hours before being captured in Indiana. Kara did not face any charges. David was held without bail on charges of murder and abduction. Kara was placed under the care of relatives and church members. David Ludwig was arrested on November 14, 2005, after a high-speed chase that ended when his vehicle crashed into a tree. He was charged with the deaths of the Michael and Catherine following a prolonged conflict. 14-year-old Kara did not face any charges. On November 16, David was extradited back to Pennsylvania after waiving extradition. David confessed to 2 counts of intentional harm, stating that it was a deliberate act and that he intended to shoot them if they got in their way, which he did. During the young man's arrest, the police searched his vehicle and found no weapons. However, when they went to David's home, they discovered 54 firearms belonging to his father, a hunter who had taught David how to use them. In an 18-minute video from a laptop found in the house, David is seen discussing a plan to invade another family's home. The video also shows him bringing weapons into the house. According to court documents, finally he decided not to go through with the plan because there were too many cars at the location. The police declared Kara Bordon a victim in the case, yet David filed court documents claiming that surveillance footage from various stores along their route would prove she was not abducted. David did not resist efforts to return him to Pennsylvania. A Pennsylvania judge ordered him held without bail. He was not represented by an attorney during the charge presentation. A preliminary hearing was set for November 23. The trial of David was brief. According to court documents, Kara's 13-year-old sister, Caitlin, told investigators that her parents were shot after arguing with David for about an hour. Caitlin saw David shoot her father and then ran to the bathroom, where she heard a second shot, presumably the one that took her mother's life. David then ran through the house calling for Kara. She told investigators that the couple's 9-year-old son, Daniel, ran to neighbors who called 911, reporting the tragic event. In June 2006, David entered a plea agreement with District Attorney Donald R. Totaro, who had sought the death penalty as punishment. David pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree perpetrating, among other charges, and was immediately sentenced to 2 consecutive life in prison sentences. He was also ordered to pay $125,000 in restitution. Since 2006, Kara has been under guardianship represented by legal counsel. In a written statement published on November 22, 2005, the abduction charge against David was dropped, with the court concluding that Kara left with David of her own free will. David's lawyer reportedly stated that Kara voluntarily accompanied David during their journey through 3 states, and surveillance recordings showed that Kara had ample opportunity to escape. Kara admitted that she ran after David as he left her house. She simply wished to marry her beloved David. Kara has been identified as a victim in this tragic situation, and thus the District Attorney of Lancaster County did not levy any criminal charges against her. Her actions alongside David's during the investigation and the digital trail of emails, blogs, and texts they left behind contributed to this decision. At a solemn memorial service held at Lancaster Bible College, Kara, amidst her siblings, mourned her pair. NTS. The Bordon family's neighborhood showed its respect and remembrance by adorning mailboxes with white ribbons. The loss left 5 children without the guidance and love of their parents. George Landis, an elder from the Monterey Chapel, reflected on the incident by saying that the purpose behind such loss is known only to God, reassuring that Michael and Catherine are in a better place. Vera Zimmerman, 50, familiar with the Bordon family and David's mother for 7 years, remarked on the upbringing of the children, pointing out that a lapse in judgment led to the unfortunate events. David's appeal for release was finally denied by the State Appeals Court, as reported by the Lancaster County District Attorney's Office after his sentencing on June 20th. David underwent several evaluations at Camp Hill before being transferred to a state prison in Indiana County, where he began serving his life sentence for the murder of his girlfriend's parents. The tragic case of the Bordon family serves as a haunting reminder of how seemingly innocent relationships can spiral into devastating consequences. What began as a story of young love evolved into a dark tale of rebellion, betrayal, and violence, leaving an entire family shattered and 2 lives forever altered. The aftermath of this heartbreaking event highlights the fragility of trust, the dangers of secrecy, and the far-reaching impact of a single, catastrophic decision. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Ryan Poston. Ryan Poston was born on December 30th, 1982, in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky, to parents Lisa Carter and Jay Poston. He had a close and loving relationship with his 3 sisters, Allison, Catherine, and Elizabeth. Ryan spent a significant portion of his teenage years traveling and studying abroad, attending schools in both Switzerland and the Philippines. Ryan was known for his adventurous nature, exceptional physical appearance, and charismatic personality, made him a standout among his peers. After high school, he attended Indiana University, where he majored in political science, history, and geography. Ryan graduated with honors in 2005. Following his family's tradition, Ryan decided to pursue a career in law. He enrolled in the Salmon P. Chase College of Law at Northern Kentucky University. Ryan had a profound respect for the legal profession, inspired by his grandfather and uncle, who were both attorneys. He had ambitious goals, one of which is the dream of owning a law firm. For the time being, Ryan worked in Cincinnati, Ohio, where he dedicated himself to offering affordable legal services to individuals who could not afford higher-priced attorneys. Although still young, Ryan had already built a considerable reputation. He attracted many clients seeking his advice and guidance. He worked diligently to ensure that everyone, regardless of their financial situation, had access to fair and competent legal representation. In 2011, Ryan has been through a painful breakup. He often visited his cousin Carissa in Lexington, Kentucky, seeking comfort and support. On one of these visits, his life underwent a dramatic change after an encounter with Shayna Michelle Hubers. Originally from Lexington, Kentucky, Shayna was a Southern, and is the epitome of a true Southern girl, known for her extroverted and sociable personality. Her warmth and charm drew people to her. After graduating from high school in 2009 with a full scholarship, she studied psychology at the University of Kentucky. She then pursued her master's degree in psychology at Eastern Kentucky University. Despite their age gap, Ryan, 29, and Shayna, 21, couldn't deny their strong feelings for each other. Whenever Ryan visited his cousin Carissa in Lexington, he ended up spending more time with Shayna, and their connection deepened. As their relationship grew, Shayna began to spend most of her weekends in Highland Heights, Kentucky, where Ryan lived. She'd pack her bags, head to his home, and take care of him, cooking and cleaning for him. As time passed, their feelings grew deeper and deeper. Ryan introduced Shayna to his parents. She couldn't hide her excitement from her friends, raving about Ryan, and shares her dream of becoming Ryan's wife. However, the promising future of Ryan and Shayna came to a tragic end on October 12, 2012. On that day, Shayna called the authorities and reported that she had just killed her boyfriend, Ryan. According to Shayna, the incident began when Ryan attempted to physically abuse her. He allegedly dragged her out of the house when she tried to collect her belongings, and he confronted her with a gun. The situation became very tense and turned into a violent brawl, during which Shayna gained control of the firearm. Feeling intimidated by Ryan's, she panicked and pulled the trigger, shooting him. Believing Ryan was fatally wounded and wanting to end his suffering, she shot him several more times. Shayna believed Ryan's death was inevitable, so she wanted to end his suffering. After the shooting, Shayna placed the gun on a bookshelf and called 911 to report the incident. When officers arrived, they request her to exit the apartment with her hands raised. Despite initial hesitation, but she complied, following the officer's instructions to lie face down on the ground. Throughout that time, Shayna appeared visibly upset. After handcuffing Shayna and placing her in the patrol vehicle, the officers entered the apartment. Inside, they found Ryan Poston dead on the dining room floor, covered in blood. Investigators then arrived and surveyed Ryan's condo. The condo appeared somewhat messy, but not unusually so for a 29-year-old man. Further investigation revealed that Ryan had a permit to carry a concealed weapon and owned firearms. The gun used by Shayna to shoot Ryan was identified as his own Sig Sauer semi-automatic pistol. Based on evidence from the apartment, investigators concluded Ryan was sitting at the table when Shayna started shooting. Blood on the table confirmed this. However, several items on the dining table were untouched, contradicting Shayna's account of a struggle. Typically, a fight would have knocked these items out of place. Investigators thoroughly examined Ryan's apartment for clues. Simultaneously, officers went door to door in the neighborhood to gather more information from Ryan's neighbors. A neighbor named Nikki provided valuable information to the detective. She knows Shayna well and feels Shayna is more responsible for the relationship than Ryan. Nikki reported that the couple often had loud arguments that disturbed the neighborhood. Months earlier, Shayna had visited Nikki, crying and expressing her fear of Ryan. Shayna claimed that a violent altercation with Ryan had left her injured, and he threw her down the hallway. Nikki believed Shayna's story and urged her to report the incident to the police. However, Shayna decided not to do that. When Shayna was at the police station, detectives interviewed her about the shooting of boyfriend Ryan. Before they started the questioning, the officers told Shayna her rights, which informed her that she had the right to a lawyer. Shayna asked for a lawyer, so the questioning was put on hold. While she waited in the interrogation room, she filled out some paperwork, under the supervision of a detective. Shayna chose to speak with the detective despite asking for an attorney. When asked the name of the victim, Shayna showed no emotion, simply stating, "the man she killed," clearly referring to her long-term boyfriend, Ryan. During the interrogation, Shayna explained that she acted in self-defense. She claimed Ryan had physically attacked her, grabbing her throat and throwing her around their apartment. During a break in the interrogation, the detective stepped out of the room and another officer took over. Shayna then shared new information with the officer about her confrontation with Ryan. She stated that before the shooting, Ryan said mean and unpleasant things to her, calling her unhinged and taunting her while holding a gun. Shayna attributed Ryan's violent behavior that night to being under the influence of substances. She maintained her account of the incident leading up to the shooting, claiming Ryan was sitting at the dining table handling ammunition for his pistol. She caught him staring at her from across the table and believed this was a sign that he intended to kick her out of his condo. Shayna admitted to seizing the opportunity to grab the gun and shoot Ryan. In the midst of chaos, Shayna fired one shot at Ryan, hitting him. Shayna initially thought she needed to end his suffering, as he was twitching after the first shot, and proceeded to fire several more shots, ultimately resulting in Ryan's death. Shayna revealed in her confession that Ryan was self-conscious about his appearance, especially his nose, and had previously expressed a desire to get a nose job. With this knowledge, Shayna intentionally shot Ryan in the face, claiming she was granting his wish. Throughout the interrogation, Shayna revealed that she was worried her relationship would be affected if people found out her boyfriend was dead. Specifically, she feared that no one would want to marry her if they knew she had killed her boyfriend, even if it was in self-defense. After hearing her out, the detective arrested Shayna and charged her with Ryan's murder. Shayna appeared to be surprised by her arrest, insisting that she had only shot Ryan to protect herself, and apparently expecting a different outcome. In 2015, Shayna's trial started, and the courtroom was filled with anticipation. The prosecutor began by comparing Shayna to Jodi Arias, another woman who had been accused of murdering her boyfriend, Travis Alexander. The similarities between the two cases were striking. This comparison increased the tension in the courtroom as everyone waited to see what would happen. The prosecutor argued that Shayna was fixated on her boyfriend, Ryan, and that he was all she could think about. According to the prosecution, Shayna's conversations were dominated by talk of Ryan. During the trial, the prosecutor presented a narrative of Ryan's intentions based on his friends' accounts. According to them, Ryan planned to end his relationship with Shayna and intentionally avoid her phone calls and texts. Despite these things, Shayna continued to show up at his condo in Highland Heights uninvited. The prosecution presented evidence that Ryan had plans to meet Audrey Bolt, the 2012 Miss Ohio, for a date on the night of the murder. This new information supported the prosecution's theory that Shayna was motivated by jealousy and anger towards Ryan's new relationship. Audrey testified that she had arranged to meet Ryan for drinks at a bar that night and waited for him, but he never arrived. It was only later that she discovered he had been shot and killed. During Shayna's trial, the prosecution showed the jury evidence that Ryan had often expressed his wish to end their relationship. Shortly before his death, Ryan called his father, Jay, for advice on how to handle the situation. Jay told Ryan to be kind to Shayna to avoid an ugly breakup. Despite Ryan wanting to break up with Shayna peacefully, but she continued to manipulate him. On the day of Ryan's death, evidence showed that he spent a lot of time texting with Shayna. In these texts, Ryan clearly told her that he didn't want to see her that weekend because he had other plans. Nevertheless, Shayna showed up at his condo uninvited, which was a common occurrence. The prosecution argued that during the argument, Ryan told Shayna it was over and she could no longer control him. This enraged Shayna, who then shot Ryan in a fit of rage. In trial, the prosecution played a video of Shayna's interrogation to show the jury that she was a cold-blooded killer. The video showed Shayna dancing and singing, seemingly unaffected by the departure of her boyfriend, Ryan. After killing a loved one in self-defense, most people would be extremely upset, crying and overwhelmed by what they had done. By showing the video, the prosecution argued that Shayna was a very emotionless person and did not feel remorse for what she did, implying that she didn't act like someone who had killed in self-defense. However, this explanation is not objective and depends on the jury's perspective. The interrogation video was a key piece of evidence in the prosecution's case against Shayna. However, it was not the only evidence presented during the trial. Shayna's defense team stuck to a consistent story throughout the trial. They claimed that Ryan was the one who behaved erratically and violently on the night of the incident, which ultimately led to Shayna shooting him. To support this claim, the defense team described Ryan's state of mind. They alleged that the combination of medications he was taking, including anti-anxiety medication and amphetamines, is the cause. To strengthen their argument, Shayna's attorneys presented autopsy results to the jury, prove that Ryan was using these drugs at the time of his death. This evidence suggested that Ryan's actions may have been influenced by the medications he is taking. The defense also called an expert toxicologist to testify that combining anti-anxiety medication and amphetamines could lead to violent and paranoid behavior. The goal of this testimony was to create a plausible explanation for Shayna's actions and then prove that she killed Ryan in self-defense. During Shayna's trial in April 2015, the prosecution was concerned that she would be acquitted because she was an intelligent, young, and beautiful woman. They worried that her self-defense claims might sway the jury. However, on April 23, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, convicting Shayna Michelle Hubers of murdering her boyfriend, Ryan Poston. At the sentencing hearing in August 2015, Shayna continued to blame Ryan for his death, which outraged his friends and family. Despite the evidence presented during the trial, Shayna maintained her innocence and refused to take responsibility for her actions. In Kentucky, a defendant who is a victim of domestic violence may be eligible for parole after serving 20% of their sentence. However, the judge did not grant Shayna this reduced parole, citing that she had committed a premeditated murder. Shayna was sentenced to 40 years in prison and will be eligible for parole in 17 years, in 2032, when she is 41 years old. Shayna appealed her sentence and was granted a new trial in August 2016. The appeal was granted because one of the jurors had a felony conviction, which is against Kentucky law, as felons are not allowed to serve on juries. In August 2018, after a 4-month delay, Shayna's second trial began. During opening arguments, Shayna's defense attorney stated that she had made every effort to please Ryan for the entire time they were together, a year and a half. But in the end, their love story encountered problems. According to the defense team, on the first night Shayna and Ryan met, he committed physical and sexual violence against her. This incident had a profound and lasting effect on Shayna, causing her to take several weeks to respond to Ryan's messages afterward. The defense claimed that Shayna's history of trauma began in high school when she was sexually assaulted. This led to her struggling with alcohol addiction and sexual promiscuity for many years. Her defense team argued that this traumatic experience significantly influenced her behavior on the night of the murder. The defense strategy aimed to create a sympathetic of Shayna by sharing her troubled past. They sought to prove that Shayna was not fully in control of her actions on the night of the murder. The defense hoped to show that Shayna's behavior was the result of a mix of factors. These factors included her history of abuse and her toxic relationship with Ryan. The goal was to show that Shayna was a victim of domestic violence at the hands of Ryan, rather than a cold-blooded killer. The defense argued that Shayna's actions were not driven by a desire for revenge or financial gain. Instead, they were the result of years of abuse she suffered at the hands of Ryan. Shayna's defense attorney argued that Ryan's constant criticism about her weight and chest size, as well as his pressure on her to get breast enlargement, significantly affected her self-esteem. The defense claimed that this criticism, along with the strain in their sexual relationship, contributed to Shayna's feelings of inadequacy. The defense presented evidence that Shayna had sought medical help to improve their romantic life, getting an injection to address their sexual difficulties. However, Ryan's rejection and lack of interest made the problems in their relationship worse, leaving Shayna feeling frustrated and isolated. Additionally, the defense alleged that Ryan would often end things with Shayna and then talk to other women, further straining the problems in their relationship. During their opening statement, the prosecution told the jury that they wouldn't portray Ryan as a perfect boyfriend. However, they made it clear that he wasn't abusive. They claimed that Shayna shot and killed Ryan not in self-defense. The prosecution alleged that Shayna shot Ryan because he had ended their relationship on the night of the incident. Ryan had decided it was time to break up with Shayna because she would not leave him alone. According to the prosecution, Shayna's repeated returns to Ryan after he ended things demonstrated her inability to move on from the relationship. During the trial, the prosecution showed text messages from Shayna to her friends. These messages stated that the intimate activities between Shayna and Ryan had strengthened their relationship. However, when Shayna took the stand in her own defense during her second trial, she disagreed. She claimed that these activities had actually pushed them further apart. In another set of text messages, Shayna had asked to have sex, but Ryan was taking antidepressants. The medication's side effects had reduced his sex drive. However, when Shayna testified, she alleged that Ryan had forced her into having sex. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury convicted Shayna Michelle Hubers of murdering Ryan Poston for the second time. Despite conflicting testimonies and evidence, they upheld their initial verdict. During the sentencing hearing, Shayna's mother emotionally shared her daughter's singing talent and how it earned her multiple college scholarships. Choked with emotion, she asked the jury to consider the possibility of parole for Shayna. However, she acknowledged this didn't lessen the grief and suffering that Ryan's family was experiencing. Shayna Michelle Hubers was sentenced to life in prison without parole. She must serve at least 17 years before being considered for parole in 2032. She is serving her sentence at the Kentucky Correctional Institute for Women in Pewee Valley, Kentucky. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Gretchen Harrington. Gretchen Harrington was born on June 13, 1967, in Pennsylvania. She was the youngest of 3 daughters, but her family didn't stay in Pennsylvania for long. Soon after her birth, they moved to the small town of Bumo, where her father, a pastor, obtained a job at the local church. Gretchen immediately loved this new town. She spends a lot of time outdoors with her sisters and her new friends. The town was incredibly safe, giving parents felt comfortable letting their children play outside until nightfall. The town of Bumo seemed to be the ideal place for kids from a religious family to grow up. As a result, Gretchen spent a lot of time at her father's church and excelled in Sunday school, consistently earning top grades. On August 15, 1975, Gretchen's mother and newborn sister were set to return home from the hospital. 8-year-old Gretchen was excited to meet her new sibling. However, her father reminded her not to miss Sunday school, considering her perfect attendance record and high grades. Although Gretchen was hesitant, but she decided to attend church, taking her Bible along. Normally, she would have walked to church with her older sisters, but on that morning, they stayed home. The church was only a short distance away, less than a mile, so she didn't feel afraid to walk alone. The Sunday school lessons were divided into 2 sessions. First, the children gathered at Trinity Church, and after about an hour and a half, some of them, including Gretchen, were to head to her father's church. However, when the kids arrived at the second church at 11:30 a.m., Gretchen's father noticed that his daughter was missing. Thinking that Gretchen might have stayed at the first church, her father called Trinity Church to check. David's wife, a Sunday school teacher and pastor's spouse, answered the call. She reported that Gretchen was not there. She immediately informed her husband, David, about the situation. He was surprised to hear this, as Gretchen had not been in attendance at his Sunday school class that morning. Growing increasingly worried, Gretchen's father asked David to contact the police while he began searching for his daughter. He drove along the route between the 2 churches, checked nearby streets, and reached out to the parents of Gretchen's friends, but she was nowhere to be found. Her friends were all either at church or at home, and Gretchen's best friend, who was David's daughter, hadn't seen her all day. The police quickly launched a search for Gretchen. As people learned about her disappearance, they rallied together to help find her. Since Gretchen's father is a well-respected local pastor, hundreds of volunteers joined the search, many of whom knew and admired him. The volunteers and police scoured the town and surrounding areas, including wooded regions and the riverbank. A police helicopter even assisted the search from above. Despite the extensive search continuing late into the night, but they still couldn't find Gretchen. The search for Gretchen continued to grow the following day, with even more volunteers joining To aid in the search, the police created and distributed flyers displaying Gretchen's photo and details about her disappearance to motorists and along roads. Despite these extensive efforts, the police were unable to uncover any leads or determine what had happened to Gretchen. As the days went by with no new information, Gretchen's disappearance remained a mystery, deeply impacting the town. In the past, it was common for children to have the freedom to roam the streets without adult supervision. They would often spend hours exploring the woods and swimming in the nearby river with no one watching over them, and their parents rarely worried. However, the recent disappearance of Gretchen changed everything, which sparked widespread fear and anxiety among residents. As people tried to make sense of what had happened, various theories emerged. Some speculated that Gretchen might have left home voluntarily, while others believed she may have drowned while swimming in the river. The most disturbing theory, however, was that she had been kidnapped. As a result, parents became extremely cautious, no longer letting their children out without supervision. One mother even went as far as cutting her daughter's hair short to disguise her as a boy. Overnight, the once peaceful town turned into a place of uncertainty and fear. Police have also questioned anyone who may be involved in Gretchen's disappearance. They gathered several new leads from conversations with witnesses. One witness reported seeing a girl who resembled Gretchen near the church that morning, approached by a green station wagon. However, the witness did not see what happened next. Another person shared a similar story, but described a white Cadillac approaching the girl. The police investigated these leads by identifying and checking the owners of matching vehicles in the area. Unfortunately, this did not yield any results. 4 days later, a resident of Westchester, a nearby town, contacted the police after finding children's shorts that matched the description of Gretchen's clothing. Investigators showed the shorts to Gretchen's mother, but she confirmed they did not belong to her daughter. From then on, there was still no progress in the case. The search operation was eventually suspended, and the focus shifted to the investigation. The police continued to interview witnesses and follow up on any available leads. However, as time passed, the chances of finding Gretchen alive grew increasingly slim. On October 14th, a jogger in a national park, approximately 20 minutes from Bumo, made a noticed something strange in the bushes. Initially, he wasn't sure what it was, but upon closer inspection, he realized it was a human body. The jogger immediately reported the things to the park rangers, who then alerted the police. Upon investigation, the authorities determined that the remains belonged to a child. However, identifying the child to be extremely difficult due to the advanced state of decomposition. Investigators initially suspected it might be Gretchen, so they showed her parents pictures of the clothes found next to the remains. These clothes had been carefully folded. Gretchen's mother confirmed the clothes found belonged to her daughter, as she had made them herself. Forensic experts further the identification by matching the remains to Gretchen's dental records. The cause of death was determined to be multiple severe blows to the head, and the case was reclassified as a homicide. The body was so decomposed that investigators were unable to determine any further details about the circumstances surrounding her death, including whether she had been sexually assaulted. Additionally, DNA analysis technology was not available at the time, 1975, leaving investigators without any DNA clues to pursue. The town was shaken by the news of Gretchen's murder, leading to an influx of tips for the police. As concerns about a violent offender still on the loose grew, citizens urged authorities to swiftly bring the perpetrator to justice. As the investigation continued, authorities received numerous tips about suspicious individuals seen in the park where Gretchen's body was found. Unfortunately, these leads did not aid in the case. Investigators also thoroughly vetted nearby residents with a history of violent crimes, but this approach yielded no results. Several months after the body was discovered, the case came to a standstill with no new developments. In subsequent years, detectives would periodically reopen the case, thoroughly reviewing existing leads and tips, but to no avail. This was largely due to a lack of evidence. Even with advancements in DNA analysis, the police found no concrete leads. No foreign DNA was found on Gretchen's body or her clothes, leaving the case unsolved for decades. The investigation was periodically mentioned in the media, but public interest waned. Following the crime, parents in the town became highly cautious and protective of their children due to fearing another attack. This collective fear lingered for years, changing the lives of Brawl's children. Months later, a crucial piece of information came to light. A woman contacted the authorities to share her account and met with the lead detective to tell her story. At the time of Gretchen's murder, the woman was 10 years old and lived in Havertone, close to Gretchen's home. She was friends with Gretchen and her older sisters, as well as other kids in the neighborhood. The woman often slept over at her friends' houses. One incident, in particular, stood out and was pivotal to her coming forward. While sleeping over at a friend's house, the woman woke up in the middle of the night to find the friend's father touching her. She then saw him quickly leave the room and was too afraid to tell anyone. However, the same thing happened again the following night. The next morning, she confided in one of her friends, who surprisingly revealed that this was a common occurrence. The friend's father would often come into their room at night. The woman immediately reported this to her parents when she returned home. But instead of contacting the police, they simply forbade her from visiting the friend's house again. This disturbing incident occurred just 1 week before Gretchen's disappearance. The woman shared a crucial piece of information with the authorities: the name of the man she suspected, David Zandstra, a pastor who taught at the Sunday school. However, her account didn't end there. She also shared a disturbing incident involving one of her friends, which happened a month after Gretchen's disappearance. This friend was approached by a man who tried to kidnap, but her friend managed to avoid the situation by refusing to get into his car. The man who made the attempt was none other than David Zandstra. To support her claim, the woman provided detectives with her personal diary from that period. In the diary entry dated September 15, 1975, she recorded a conversation with her friend, who had begged her to keep a secret due to concerns that David might cause her harm. With this new information, the police reopened the case. Upon re-examining the original case materials, detectives uncovered several suspicious details that indirectly pointed to David's involvement. Notably, it was he who initially reported Gretchen's disappearance to the authorities. The pastor David gave investigators a precise description of Gretchen's clothing: dark blue zip-up shorts with front studs and pockets. He also mentioned a white top and braided hair. However, David claimed that he had not seen Gretchen that day. This raised a question: how did he know what she wore, especially since his description's claim was later confirmed to be true after Candy's body was found, as she was wearing the exact same clothes he described. Further investigation revealed that the Sunday school classes were delayed by 50 minutes due to the pastor David's late arrival. This delay would have given him enough time to abduct Gretchen, kill her, dispose of her body in the park, and return to the church to begin teaching. According to David's initial statement, he drove some children in his van to Candy's father's church after the classes, and only became aware of Candy's absence when her father said it out to him. A significant detail in the case was that David, his wife, and their 3 children relocated to another state just months after Gretchen's disappearance. Notably, David owned multiple vehicles, including a green station wagon that drew police attention. A witness had previously reported seeing a similar vehicle near the church on the day Gretchen vanished. Given these clues, detectives decided to interrogate David. At 83 years old and residing in Georgia, David agreed to speak with detectives at the local police station on July 17, 2023. When David realized the detectives suspected him of murder, he initially responded with denial, asking what evidence they had against him. However, the detectives revealed two key pieces of evidence: a woman's testimony about an incident at his house and allegations of him molesting his own daughters. David's demeanor drastically changed. As he realized his dark past was exposed, he stopped denying the accusations and, after 48 years of silence, he began to speak about the murder. According to David's account, on a Sunday morning, he drove his green American Motor station wagon to Gretchen's father's church. There, he saw Gretchen walking outside and offered to give her a ride. Gretchen accepted, likely because their families were friends, and she was also on her way to his Sunday school classes. However, instead of taking Gretchen to the church, David drove her to a secluded park area. He ordered her to undress, but she refused and she asked to be taken home. David then hit Gretchen repeatedly on the head, knocking her unconscious. After Gretchen lost consciousness, David removed her clothes and assaulted her. He then drove her to another park and checked for a pulse, but found none. Believing she was dead, he carried her body into the bushes and covered it with branches. David then returned to the church to teach his Sunday school class. After he confessed, the police arrested him to Gretchen's murder and had him extradited to Pennsylvania to face trial. His arrest sparked a wider and more thorough investigation. Detectives suspected that David had assaulted multiple girls, and they strongly believed there were additional victims. The fact that he had been a pastor in various cities and states for decades led as it suggested he may have committed many more crimes. Because David was a pastor, respected by everyone, he initially was not suspected. However, with the truth finally exposed, detectives collected his DNA sample and began comparing it to evidence in unsolved cases. They also investigated unsolved disappearances of girls in cities where he had been employed. Investigators quickly identified a case similar to that of Gretchen. In 1991, 4-year-old Amanda Campbell from California, she vanished from her home in a quiet neighborhood without leaving any clues. Notably, at the time of Amanda's disappearance, David was a pastor in that same neighborhood. Although there is currently no evidence linking him to the crime, police have identified similarities between the two cases, suggesting he could be a suspect. David Zandstra, now 83, is being held in a jail in Cobb County, Georgia. He was denied bail and denied extradition to Pennsylvania, despite he filing an extradition request. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Zoe Sarnaki. Zoe Sarnaki was born on March 25, 1991, in Portland, Maine, a city in the northwest of the United States. She was raised in a loving family consisting of her parents, John and Linda Sarnaki, her brother Gregory, and 2 half-sisters, with whom she still maintains a close relationship. Zoe's father, John, worked as a construction worker and provided well for the family. As a result, Zoe was exposed to a variety of creative activities from a young age, which led to her strong interest in art. Her family also loved animals and had 5 cats at home. As Zoe grew older, she became increasingly curious and developed a strong desire to travel and experience different cultures. She also adopted a vegan lifestyle, choosing to consume only plant-based foods and avoiding animal products. Zoe was raised in an ecologically conscious culture that prioritized animal welfare, environmental conservation, and healthy living. This culture played a major role in shaping her personality. By the time she started high school in 2005, Zoe had already built up a large group of friends who considered her to be cheerful, enthusiastic, and friendly. However, things changed in 2008 when Zoe made a shocking decision on her 17th birthday. She decided to drop out of school. Her friends and family were surprised by the decision, and her parents were particularly unhappy with her choice. Despite this sudden change, Zoe's former classmates remember her fondly, describing her as a kind and loving person. A few months after leaving school, Zoe found a job at a local bakery and cafe called Bagel Works, marking the beginning of a new chapter in her life. On March 25, 2009, Zoe's 18th birthday, she was looking forward to getting a tattoo on one of her arms. Inspired by the works of Austrian artist Gustav Klimt, she had a clear idea of the design she wanted. Zoe went to a tattoo parlor in the Old Port area. There, she met 27-year-old tattoo artist Chad Gurney. They quickly formed a bond, and after just a few days of meeting, Zoe agreed to start a romantic relationship with him. Notably, their 9-year age gap did not stop her from pursuing a relationship with Chad. Chad had a unique background. Born and raised in Maine, he attended Wells High School, where he was known as the goalie for lacrosse, a competitive sport played between two teams using a small rubber ball and a long-handled stick. After graduating from high school, Chad moved to Lynchburg, Virginia, to attend Liberty University, an institution known for its ties to the famous evangelical pastor Jerry Falwell. Chad has many tattoos on his body, most of which depict aliens. One design stands out, a gray alligator tattoo. In the context of tattoos, alien designs can mean two things. One is that the person believes in the existence of beings from other planets, and two is that it reflects the personality of the person wearing the tattoo, who is trying to say that they do not fit into this world, that they are different from others, and that they are unique. As for the reptile tattoo, it is said to symbolize danger and hostility, a predator to be avoided. Before moving to Portland in 2005, Chad had a difficult time recovering from a near-fatal car accident in Alabama that had occurred 4 years earlier. On a trip to a lacrosse game, a local van carrying players and coaches was hit from behind by a car and pushed into the oncoming lane, where it collided with a large truck. The impact threw Chad from the van and he nearly lost his leg. He has undergone approximately 20 surgeries due to severe head injuries. Chad underwent a psychiatric evaluation following his accident, which revealed that he had cognitive impairments. These impairments affected his speech, memory, and mathematical reasoning. After the accident, Chad received a large settlement from a lawsuit, allowing him to become financially independent. Years later, in 2007, Chad sought treatment for anxiety and depression. He was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and organic personality disorder. In 2009, Chad traveled to Hawaii alone, where he met Zoe. Chad and Zoe began dating and decided to have an open relationship, which meant they were free to see other people. After starting their relationship, Chad continued to travel. In May 2009, he took a weekend trip to Vancouver, a city in Canada. When Chad returned to Portland, Zoe confessed to him remorsefully that while he was away, she had had an affair with another man and had sex with him. At first, Chad did not seem to mind the affair, as they had previously agreed to maintain an open relationship. However, after this confession, Chad changed and began to insist that Zoe quit her job and go with him to Thailand. Zoe refused him, not knowing the devastating consequences that would follow. On May 25, 2009, Zoe came to Chad's apartment and took a nap because she was tired. While she was sleeping, Chad violently attacked her. He grabbed her by the neck, hit her in the head, and strangled her until she died. After Zoe died, Chad continued to commit crimes, including having sex with her body and then decapitating her. After committing the crime, Chad showered, dressed and drove to a nearby gas station to fill up the tank, showing a disturbing calmness after committing such a heinous act. Chad returned to his apartment, where he poured petrol over Zoe, creating a trail of fuel leading to the front door. He then set it on fire. Before the fire spread throughout the apartment, Chad quickly grabbed a backpack filled with items for his trip to Thailand, a laptop and a handgun. After the apartment was completely engulfed, Chad went to an ATM to withdraw cash and then checked into the Old Orchard Beach Motel, where he relaxed in the hot tub. A 911 call was made and emergency services were alerted to the fire at Chad's apartment. Police arrived quickly on the scene and extinguished the fire. Upon entering the building, they discovered a horrific scene. Inside the charred ruins of the apartment was a badly burned body surrounded by crosses and other religious objects. A neighbor called Chad to report that his house was on fire. Chad replied that he was out of town, headed to his hometown of Lewiston, and quickly ended the call. 2 days later, on May 26, Chad spoke to his best friend and confessed to killing Zoe, calmly explaining the events that led up to it. He appeared rational, claiming that he was exhausted from the pain and had lost control of himself. While driving through the streets of Portland, Chad carelessly ran a red light and was pulled over by a city police officer. During the stop, Chad claimed that a previous accident in 2005 had left him with mental health issues, and he asked his friend to explain this to the police over the phone. After a conversation with his friend and the police, Chad voluntarily went to the police station and confessed to Zoe's murder. The police then seized his belongings. A forensic examination of Chad's computer discovered a video of the gruesome scene on his hard drive, titled "Woman Half Decapitated Over Suspicion of Adultery." At least if she cheated, she wouldn't do it again. This incriminating evidence was later presented to the court. On Wednesday, May 27th, Zoe's high school held a moment of silence during class to honor her. Before lunch, teachers and students were informed of the tragic incident. Later that day, Christine Koo, Zoe's half-sister, issued a statement to local media on behalf of the family. She stressed that this was no ordinary murder, as the perpetrator, Chad, had committed many heinous acts. Christine reported that the police had informed her of the shocking events surrounding Zoe's murder. According to them, Chad had brutally attacked Zoe in a fit of rage, sexually assaulted her, and then set her body on fire. He then calmly went to a motel and got into a hot tub. A week after Zoe's tragic death, on June 2, 2009, a vigil was held in front of Chad's former apartment building. The vigil served as a moment of comfort for Zoe's loved ones and friends. Many strangers, shocked and outraged by the brutal crime, attended. It is estimated that more than 150 people attended the vigil and memorial service for Zoe. Candles and flowers were placed on the steps of the building where her life was tragically ended in memory of Zoe. Zoe's father, John, and her half-sister, Courtney, attended the vigil and were deeply moved by the outpouring of support from so many people. During the investigation, police interviewed Chad's friends and acquaintances, who said he was on a spiritual quest and had plans to travel to Thailand to study Eastern religions. His apartment was said to be decorated with many spiritual artifacts and symbols. Chad's personality seemed to be a mixture of contradictions. On the one hand, he was known to be kind and charming, often giving small gifts to those around him. He also expressed a desire to use the money he received from an accident to help humanity. However, Chad also had a harder side, with tattoos on his arms and a reputation for provocative and confrontational behavior. Those who knew Chad noted that his behavior often pushed people away. Robert Collins, a 24-year-old chef who knew Chad, recalled that people would often ignore him and turn away when Chad came to parties. Chad also confided to Robert that the only thing he truly sympathized with was pain, which was further emphasized by the word pain tattooed on his knuckles. Police and prosecutors have made great efforts to gather every piece of information about this brutal crime. Steve Weir, who rented an apartment from Chad in 2006, was also questioned. He mentioned religious paintings and artifacts in Chad's apartment and said Chad told him he was interested in theology but did not practice it. Watson Atkinson, a tattoo parlor owner in Portland, recalled a conversation with Chad in which Chad shared his plans to use his accident compensation to find direction in his life. However, Watson's impression of Chad was disturbing because Chad seemed to focus on teenage girls, which worried him so much that he forbade his 16-year-old daughter from communicating with Chad, and also repeatedly warned Zoe to stay away from him. An investigation into Chad's background revealed his medical history and mental health diagnoses, but subsequent evaluations by multiple psychologists during his incarceration found no evidence of delusions or hallucinations. In conversations with professionals, Chad expressed strong emotions related to his perception of Zoe's infidelity, which he claimed had frustrated him. According to court documents, he claimed that he was fed up with all his girlfriend's infidelity. He began thinking about killing Zoe when she confessed her infidelity to him. As the trial began, a 127-minute tape of the police interview was played. The tape was recorded 12 hours after the crime and featured Chad speaking to Denham police. In the recording, Chad described his relationship with Zoe as extremely close, with Zoe sometimes staying at his apartment for up to a week. He denied any history of fighting between them and believed they were destined for each other. Chad also admitted to taking Zoe's life, describing her as the most beautiful girl he had ever met and feeling he had a responsibility to tell the truth about what had happened. During his conversation with the police, Chad remained calm and apologized frequently, breaking down in tears several times. He recounted the events of May 25, 2009, saying that Zoe was napping. Chad said that he approached her and began to strangle her, causing Zoe to defend herself and scream for him to stop. According to Chad, when Zoe resisted, he hit her in the head and continued to strangle her until she lost consciousness and stopped breathing. He then detailed the next terrifying actions he performed on her body. Chad revised his testimony, saying that he used 3 knives instead of a samurai sword. He described how he placed a cross between his legs and recounted his actions while Zoe's body burned in the apartment. Chad called himself a terrible person. When questioned about the beheading, Chad claimed that he was trying to turn Zoe's death into a ritual of forgiveness. Chad said he felt haunted on the day of the murder and that everything in his life seemed to have gone dark. He described himself as a primitive person, acting on instinct for hours, which led him to commit the heinous act. The recording of the interrogation, which became key evidence in Cumberland County Superior Court, was heard in its entirety by Judge Roland Cole during the first trial. It was revealed that Chad faced serious consequences, at least 25 years in prison, or possibly life in prison. However, if his mental disorder was recognized, he could be sent to a psychiatric facility in Austin. During the 2011 trial, it was determined that Chad had strangled the victim in a fit of rage. The question remains whether Chad would agree to this testimony, since he had waived his right to a jury trial. Prosecutors argued that Chad, a former Liberty University student and lacrosse champion, was fully aware of his actions. To support this claim, they presented testimony from a psychiatrist and a psychologist, both of whom agreed that Chad understood the gravity of his actions and decided to violently kill his girlfriend. Chad's defense team continued to emphasize his mental health struggles, arguing that he was out of control. On January 11, 2012, Chad's attorneys filed a motion with the Supreme Court to exclude from the case evidence found on Chad's personal computer at the time of his arrest. This evidence included a gruesome video in which he demonstrated how to decapitate an unfaithful woman. The defense argued that the video was inadmissible as evidence. Ultimately, nearly 3 years after the crime, Chad Gurney, then 30, was sentenced to 50 years in prison for the murder of Zoe Sarnaki and an additional 25 years for arson. The judge ruled that the sentences would run consecutively. Chad's lawyers challenged the sentence, but their appeal was rejected. Zoe's family members were disappointed that Chad did not receive a life sentence. During sentencing, the presiding judge said that Chad had a distorted view of the world, but the court's main concern was whether the defendant knew that his actions were wrong. Chad's lawyer, Sarah Churchill, presented her case to the Supreme Court, claiming that Chad's concussion and other injuries from the 2005 accident had left her client in a state of confusion and delusion. She argued that the judge erred in finding Chad guilty, particularly that the search warrant should not have included his smartphone, laptop, and social media pages. Sarah Churchill argued that the court should have focused more on evidence of Chad's psychosis and unstable mental state at the time of the crime, rather than evidence found on his digital devices. The Deputy Attorney General told the court that Chad was accused of killing Zoe as an act of revenge for having an affair with another man. The Deputy Attorney General explained that a video appeared to show Chad sexually assaulting Zoe as punishment for an infidelity that he considered a betrayal. The Deputy Attorney General clarified that the prosecution did not use any information from social media to build its case against Chad. He argued that the evidence convincingly demonstrated that the defendant was fully aware of his actions at the time of the crime. After the verdict was announced, Kathy Kozev, Zoe's aunt, shared with reporters that throughout the trial she felt extremely distressed as she witnessed Chad's sight and voice, taking her back to the traumatic final moments of her niece's life. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Amy Widener. Amy Widener, born in 1973, is the second of 4 children. Her siblings include an older brother, John Paul, and 2 younger sisters, Tiny and Cassie, who are 1 and 4 years younger than Amy. After their parents divorced, Gloria, the children's mother, took on the responsibility of raising the children herself. As their father played no role in raising them, the family lived in a house in Indianapolis, with Amy helping her mother with various household chores, including cooking, cleaning, and caring for her younger sisters. Amy, a bright and cheerful 14-year-old girl, had big dreams of becoming a teacher. However, her life took an unexpected turn when she became pregnant. Afraid to tell her mother, she hid her pregnancy by wearing baggy clothes for over 5 months. As her belly grew, it became harder to hide it, and eventually, her family discovered her secret when she was nearly 6 months pregnant. Gathering all her courage, Amy told her mother, Gloria, and burst into tears. Amy begged her mother not to hate her, but Gloria, though shocked, offered words of comfort and encouragement. Gloria recalls feeling stunned, thinking that this was the worst thing that could happen in her life. However, she had no idea of the even more heartbreaking events that were about to happen. The father of Amy's child was 20-year-old Tony Abercrombie, a friend of her brother. What their family did not know was that Amy and Tony had a secret relationship, with only the 2 of them knowing about their intimacy. After learning of her daughter's pregnancy, Gloria took control and forbade Amy from seeing Tony. On October 25, 1987, Amy gave birth to a daughter named Emily. Amy started school again just 6 days after giving birth. Her mother, Gloria, strongly supported Amy's return to school by taking care of Emily, allowing Amy to focus on her studies. Gloria also made sure that Amy had time to socialize with friends and live a normal teenage life. As a new mother, Amy remained dedicated to her studies, impressing her teachers with her perseverance. Despite juggling the demands of motherhood, Amy excelled in her studies, continuing to receive praise from her teachers. Amy's family adapted to the new addition, with everyone sharing the care of Emily. Over time, life began to fall into a positive pattern, with Amy overcoming her difficulties. Just when things seemed to be going smoothly, a sudden change turned everything upside down. On November 13, 1989, 16-year-old Amy woke up with a severe sore throat and decided to stay home from school, despite her mother, Gloria, offering to take Emily to a nanny. She kept her 2-year-old daughter, Emily, with her. After breakfast together, Gloria went to work, and Amy's siblings went to school, leaving Amy and Emily alone at home. Gloria tried to contact Amy by phone at 9:30 a.m. but received no response. When she called again a few hours later and still had not heard anything, Gloria became worried. She asked a nearby neighbor to stop by and check on them. The neighbor found the house quiet and unresponsive, prompting Gloria to leave work immediately and go home. When she arrived, she found Emily sitting on the stairs. Gloria called Amy, but received no answer, so she went upstairs. The scene in Amy's bedroom was tragic and shocking. Amy lay motionless and naked on the bed, surrounded by bloodstains. When Gloria realized the urgency of the situation, she quickly called 911. The police arrived and carefully searched Amy's house. At first, they thought someone had tried to break in because several items were missing, including stereo equipment and a graphic equalizer that belonged to Amy's brother, John Paul. Another item missing was a piggy bank from Amy's room, a simple glass jar with about $50 in savings for school. The police did not find any signs of forced entry. It is likely that the perpetrator entered through an unlocked back door or the front door, which Amy may have opened herself. In Amy's room, the police found key evidence, a bloody handprint on the wall and several strands of hair, likely belonging to the attacker. The medical examiner determined that Amy had been hit in the head with a sharp object, sexually assaulted, and then strangled. Amy's 2-year-old daughter, Emily, may have witnessed these events. Fortunately, Emily was found unharmed. Due to Emily's young age, the police attempted to communicate with her and gather any information she had. To create a more comfortable environment, they used finger puppets to gently question Emily about the events. During the interaction, Emily mentioned that her mother seemed very angry that day. Unfortunately, Emily did not provide any further details. To aid in their investigation, the police collected evidence, including a section of the wall with the attacker's bloody handprint, as well as the victim's clothing and bedding at the crime scene. During the investigation of Amy's case, the police spoke to her family, friends, and neighbors to gather information. One of the people they interviewed was Amy's 17-year-old brother, John Paul. Police initially suspected him, but he had an alibi and no evidence linking him to the case. Another person of interest was Tony Abercrombie, Amy's ex-boyfriend and the father of her child. He denied any involvement in her murder and expressed his deep feelings for Amy. Tony had a credible alibi at the time of the murder. Police also investigated Troy Jackson, who lived next door to Amy. Although he claimed he had nothing to do with the murder, he knew that a stereo system had been stolen on the day of the murder. Troy had no bruises or scratches on his hands, and a hair sample did not match the hair found at the crime scene. Troy also passed a lie detector test, which eventually cleared him as a suspect. Police expanded their investigation by talking to other acquaintances, neighbors, and classmates of Amy. They collected fingerprints and hair samples from these people, but no evidence pointed to any of them. A large crowd attended Amy Widener's funeral, and police attended the funeral, observing the proceedings and looking for potential clues in the case. Months passed after Amy's death, and the police still had no leads on any suspects. Gloria Widener, Amy's mother, adopted her niece Emily. As the family grieved their loss, Gloria feared for their safety, as the killer had not been caught. Fearing for her children's safety, she considered moving to a new home, but financial constraints made this impossible, forcing them to face their fears in their current home. Amy's friends were now haunted by the fear that they might be the attacker's next target. To feel safer, many of them asked their parents to take precautions and improve the security of their homes. Some even went so far as to board up their windows to protect against potential attacks. One day, when Gloria returned home after a normal day, she expected to find her daughters home from school. However, she was met with an eerie silence when she entered the house. The house was eerily empty, but her daughters' shoes were in their usual place near the door. Horrifying thoughts filled Gloria's mind as she climbed the stairs, fearing another disaster. She stood frozen in her bedroom doorway. Gloria took a deep breath and pushed the door open, finding her children simply asleep, and she breathed a sigh of relief. Occasionally, the police would visit Amy's family, inadvertently forcing them to relive the pain of that terrible day. The constant reminders of the past eventually became unbearable for Gloria. All she wanted was for the police to leave her family alone and stop stirring up memories that would never bring Amy back. In 1989, Amy was murdered and the case went cold. 13 years later, a shocking development occurred when a 29-year-old man contacted the Indianapolis Police Department claiming that he had had a dream in which Amy provided information about her death. Although he provided details about the murder, most of the information was released in news reports. Police investigated the man, who was 16 at the time of the incident and lived across the street from Amy's house. His fingerprints and DNA were tested for any potential connection, but no match was found, leading to his release. Although his call did not contribute significant evidence, it prompted police to re-examine the unsolved case. In 2002, the investigation resumed, focusing on some of Amy's friends and acquaintances. Despite renewed efforts, the investigation once again hit a dead end, leaving the case unsolved. 8 years later, a Facebook group called Remembering Amy was created by her friends, sparking renewed interest in solving the case. A police officer, unfamiliar with Facebook, asked his colleague, Officer Bill Carter, to help him print out information from a Facebook group related to a cold case. Although Bill specializes in crimes other than homicide, reviewing the details of the case piqued his interest in Amy's murder. In his spare time, he began to explore the case files. Bill scrutinized the 2-decade-old case, re-examining every detail in the file, re-evaluating the evidence, and reviewing Amy's school records from the day of the murder. He also looked at the list of people who had attended Amy's funeral. By entering the case information into the database, Bill found some overlooked leads. Among them were several friends of Amy's brother who had never been questioned by the police and had not provided DNA samples. In 2011, Officer Bill expanded his investigation by contacting Amy's family and friends, asking for potential leads and the names of people who might have information about the case. As part of his new approach, he also began collecting DNA samples from people who had not previously been considered during the initial investigation. This effort complemented the neighborhood survey conducted after the crime, where police recorded the names of residents who lived near Amy's home. Bill reviewed the case file and returned to the area to determine if any of the original residents still lived nearby. His investigation led him to a woman who was a neighbor and friend of Amy's. The woman tried to recall the names of the boys Amy had befriended, and while she mentioned some names that the police knew, she also mentioned an unfamiliar name, Rodney Dank. In 2012, Bill received permission from the Cold Case Unit to officially take over the Amy case. His first step was to locate Rodney Dank to determine if he was a potential suspect. Amy's family was familiar with Rodney, as he was friends with Amy's brother, John Paul. They spent time together doing activities like biking and fishing. Bill asked John Paul about Rodney and learned that Rodney was a quiet, reserved person who kept to himself and did not arouse any suspicion. To gather more information, Bill went to the home of Rodney Dank, 40, who lived with his mother near Amy's family. Rodney worked at an auto parts store and had been divorced for some time, with an adult son whom he rarely saw. When Bill arrived at Rodney's home, his mother answered and told the police that Rodney was at work. Bill left his business card, asking Rodney to call him as soon as he returned. Rodney called Bill that evening and the police asked to meet with him to discuss Amy's murder. Rodney agreed and allowed Bill to come to his home. However, when Bill returned to Rodney's home, he was not there. Bill decided to run a background check on Rodney and discovered that Rodney had been convicted of assault in 1991 and burglary in 1997. The police also compared Rodney's fingerprints, which were already in the system, to the fingerprints found at Amy's house during the initial investigation. The test was conducted to determine if Rodney was involved in the case. When the results came back, they discovered that Rodney's fingerprints matched the bloody fingerprints found at the crime scene. After 23 years, Rodney was identified as the killer, but he had disappeared from the house. The police launched an extensive search. They tracked Rodney's credit card activity, which showed a rental car with an OnStar tracking system. The police located the car in Indianapolis, where Rodney was hiding at a friend's house. When surrounded by police, Rodney brandished a knife and claimed his innocence, injuring himself. He attempted to attack the police, but was subdued with a taser, handcuffed, and taken to hospital. During a 2-day hospital interrogation that was captured on camera, Rodney confessed to Amy's murder. He said his original intention was to rob, not anticipating Amy's presence due to her illness. Rodney described entering the house through a sliding glass door, where he was suddenly confronted by a panicked Amy. In his panic, he grabbed the nearest object and hit Amy in the head, killing her. As he recounted the events of the next 2 days, Rodney repeatedly mentioned that his memory of the incident was hazy, blaming the 23 years that had passed since the crime. Rodney's account of his actions was inconsistent, and he initially mentioned visiting Amy's house with someone called Bag. However, he could not recall many details about this person, including their appearance. When asked about Emily, Rodney stated that he did not see her during the incident and did not know that she was in the house or that she had called for help. Throughout the interrogation, Rodney remained calm. Rodney's DNA was collected and matched with semen found on Amy's bedsheets and blankets in 1989. Fingerprints and semen found at the crime scene were both confirmed to be Rodney's, with no indication that anyone else was involved. When Rodney was revealed as the killer, Amy's family was shocked. They were baffled how Rodney, who was quiet and unassuming, could have committed such a crime. Rodney was friends with Amy's brother John Paul and often visited their home, which was across the street from his. Even more remarkable was that Rodney attended Amy's funeral, where he mourned her death and offered his condolences to her mother, Gloria. Police Bill later found Rodney's signature in Amy's funeral book, a detail that had previously been overlooked. Reinvestigating the case led Bill to a crucial discovery. Rodney's name was first mentioned by Tony, Amy's ex-boyfriend and Emily's biological father, in 2003. Tony revealed that Rodney had frequently visited Amy's family home. Bill realized that Rodney had somehow escaped notice in 1989 and had never been suspected or questioned at the time. Further investigation into Rodney's background in 2012 uncovered a disturbing fact. His biological son, Dylan, was in prison for a crime committed in 2009. Dylan was 16 when he killed his biological mother, Mary McHenry. He claimed that he had acted in response to her abuse, using a baseball bat to inflict the fatal wounds. Mary died of her injuries. Dylan turned 17 just days after the incident, leaving behind a tragic and heartbreaking case. Despite being largely absent from Dylan's life due to his early divorce from Mary McHenry, Rodney attended Dylan's trial in 2009, opting for a plea deal that resulted in a 20-year prison sentence. By the time of his scheduled release in 2029, Dylan will be 37. Rodney, on the other hand, initially insisted that he had an accomplice in Amy's murder, a man he knew as Bag. However, in June 2013, just 10 days before his trial was due to begin, Rodney, then 42, recanted his earlier confession, admitting that he had acted alone in Amy's murder. Rodney's sudden confession, combined with the substantial evidence against him, led to his 65-year prison sentence in 2013. Amy's family held a meeting with Detective Bill Carter after Amy's case was solved. To mark the 24th anniversary of her death, they released 24 balloons into the air, expressing their gratitude for Detective Bill's crucial role in solving the case. The family thanked him for his efforts, especially for identifying Rodney as the killer after just 12 days of investigation. Police officer Bill Carter received a prestigious award from the Indianapolis Police Department in January 2014. Although he was offered a position in the Homicide Bureau, he chose to stay in his current position. Years later, Amy's daughter, Emily, has grown up. She graduated from her mother's alma mater and then went to college, looking for new opportunities. Eventually, Emily moved from Indianapolis to California. Gloria still lives in the house where her daughter, Amy, tragically died. She has kept Amy's room as a memory of her, with photos still on display. Now, the room is also where Gloria's grandchildren play when they visit for the holidays, bringing joy and new life to a space once filled with sadness and loss.